燃え上がれガンダム。Hello and welcome to Weekly Suit Gundam, the special bonus podcast brought to you by the folks at the Weekly Stuff Podcast. I am Sean Chapman.
And I'm Jonathan Lack.
And we are here once again to dive into the wacky, the wild, the wonderful world of Mobile Suit Gundam. This time on the show is a very, very special episode because it is the 3rd year anniversary. Jonathan Lack, we have been talking about Gundam for 3 fucking years.
3 years. It's June 10th, 2022. We started this June 10th, 2019. We started it with 2 episodes of Mobile Suit Gundam. Just the first 2 episodes, 45 minutes basically of Gundam. And look how far we've come. Because now, on this, the date of our 3rd anniversary, we've watched not just 2 episodes of Gundam. We've watched all the Gundam.
Yes, we are officially caught up. Which is crazy. It was just a thing that we were kind of targeting because it seemed at a certain point that it was clear that about the 3rd year anniversary is where we would be catching up. I'm glad that we've managed to fully catch up with all the Gundam. So that means that the 3rd year anniversary is a big anniversary for this podcast because we have to do all the rankings. We have to rank all the things because we have all of the Gundam, a whole sea of Gundam out in front of us that we need to put into the little boxes and define what they mean and what they are and how good they are for our own, sick pleasures.
Yes, and it's going to be such a big project to rank everything that we're splitting this into at least 3 episodes.
Yes.
Part 1 is today, and Part 1 is going to be very focused. What you're going to hear on today's episode is just our rankings of the shows. So what did we watch in Season 3 of Weekly Suit Gundam since we did this last year? We're going to rank those shows. And then we're going to rank all of the Gundam, both individually, and then we're going to come together and come up with our together official podcast ranking of all of the Gundam shows now that we are caught up, and that will be the focus of today's episode. We will go on and we'll do our favorite songs and mobile suits and all of that stuff, the really hard stuff, but in future parts, because there's only so much we could get to in one episode.
Yes, I think this is more than enough for a full episode of the show, and then so then we'll also be tackling our songs lists, our mobile suit lists, our character lists, and all that kind of stuff in a future episode, and then also we'll be having, I think we call it a party episode, where we'll be getting lists, recommendations from the audience, so that we can have a bunch of dumb, stupid lists and questions and stuff like that to talk about, just ranking weird, frivolous things in the world of Gundam, and the party episode will be just like a celebration of all the weird and the fun and the craziness that is having watched this entire franchise and done podcasts on all the major entries in this franchise over the course of 3 years.
Yes. So let's clarify that really quick. Next, on the next episode, Part 2,
yes,
we're going to do the ones that we've done in the past, like songs, soundtracks, mobile suits, characters. But then in the party episode, we want you to send us your ideas. We've already had a couple that people have suggested over the years that I have on the list. We're going to do our top 10 Gundam boys, our top 10 villains, our top 10 captains. But what other lists would you like to hear? Do you want the top 10 Haros? Do you want something like that? Whatever, just tell us what your party idea is. The weirder, the better. The weirder and the more granular and specific, the better, so we can have a real party of absolutely crazy Gundam listings. And you can ask for anything now, because we've seen it all.
Yes, exactly. There's no such thing as spoilers here. Like we're Gundam experts now. We're here at the end of all things, and so we can take in whatever we want or whatever we need from the audience.
Yep. And one other thing I just want to mention to Weekly Suit Gundam listeners is, I don't know if, I know not everyone here does, but if you do, listen to our mothership show, the Weekly Stuff podcast, which is a show that's actually weekly, we do every week. That is actually turning 10 years old in 3 days. And on Monday, June 13th, we will have our 10th anniversary podcast special coming out June 13th at 10 a.m. You can find that on YouTube. You can find that in your podcast app of choice. And it is a giant 10-hour podcast with 10 different topics. One of those topics is Gundam, and it is something Gundam-related we have never covered on the show before, so you might want to listen to that, check in on our 10th anniversary podcast. There's going to be lots of fun stuff for you. There's some other anime topics as well, so I just wanted to give that a plug. If you have not been listening to the Weekly Stuff podcast, big birthday going on over there as well.
Yes, 10th anniversaries and 3-year anniversaries. It's just the month of anniversaries here for the weekly people. I guess that's what we call ourselves.
Yep. So, Sean, before we dive into the rankings, I did this for year 1 podcast, but I forgot to do it for year 2. But now that we're all caught up, I decided to do it for year 3. I calculated how many episodes of Gundam we've watched, how many movies we've watched, how many OVAs we've watched, and I got approximate times for all of those. It's not exact. I veered on the side of being a little conservative, not to inflate the math too much. But I added all of that up. So, Sean, across all of the shows we've seen, all of the movies, all of the OVAs, we have watched 800 episodes of Gundam. That is the number. And that includes OVA, TV-length OVA episodes, like Stardust Memory, I put in there. For feature-length OVAs, like an hour or more, we've watched 22 of those. That also includes, like, the Thunderbolt films I put in there. And then for movies, we've watched and reviewed 12 movies across the different things we've done. And that all adds up to a total runtime of 22,057.5 minutes, which is 367.6 hours, which is 15.3 days of Gundam. And we've been doing this for 3 years. I've been watching Gundam for 3 years. And 3 years is 1,095 days. We had one leap day in there, so 1,096 days. 15.3 days divided by 1,096 days means I at least have spent 1.4% of the last 3 years of my life watching Gundam. That does not include rewatches, which would inflate that number. And if you add all the time spent recording Gundam podcasts, building Gunpla, doing other Gundam merchandise, it's probably like 2 or 3% of the last 3 years of my human existence, and yours too, basically, has been spent watching Gundam. That's a lot of Gundam, Sean.
That's a lot of Gundam. And the weird thing for me to think about now is the fact that this is the second time I've basically done that. Like, you can cut out, like, Build Divers Re-Rise and, like, 1 or 2 of the movies from that count if you want to, like, get it a little bit more exact for me. But yes, and I did that in the span of, like, 9 to 10 months, like, 5 or 6 years ago, or, yes, like, 7 years ago, I think now at this point. Like, what the fuck is time? I have to, like, realize, like, oh yeah, this is the 3rd year anniversary, so I can't just use the mental estimate of how long it had been since I watched all of Gundam at the start of this podcast, because that was 3 years ago.
Here's the funny thing, though, Sean. So that's, like I said, 15.3 solid days, 800 episodes, and 30-ish movies. If you want to get into Gundam, that's what you're looking forward to. That's the full... You don't need to watch all of it, to be fair, but a lot of it, most of it, is really good. Still less than One Piece. Because One Piece is at 1,020 episodes. It's still about 200 episodes short of One Piece. All of Gundam, 40 years of Gundam, still about 200 episodes short of One Piece, and One Piece is ongoing.
That is the most frightening statistic of all. The fact that you could engage it wholesomely with a franchise that has been going actively for over 40 years without any, like, significant periods of, like, nothing coming out for it, and still you're not caught up to fucking One Piece. Is a very good mathematical illustration of why I have not watched or read One Piece yet.
Yes. There's others. Naruto, if you add Boruto on top, is close to that as well. But, you don't have to add Boruto on top, is my understanding. Anyway, so there you go. Those are the numbers, Sean. But should we transition into talking about what were our year 3 shows that are sort of the main focus for the start of today?
Yeah, so we're gonna start off like the main topic with this podcast, just talking about everything we've watched in the third year. Kind of the same thing we did with the last year anniversary, mostly because like I don't want to have all the new stuff we've watched get lost in the muck of all the other shows, because we have covered 33 different items for the overall list. So like these 11 would end up getting lost in that muck a little bit. So I wanted to make sure that we had like a good stage to really talk about all the stuff we've watched in the past year and give a spotlight for all of those. So we have each made a list individually ranking all the things we've watched, all 11 items from this year on the show, and that includes the Netflix film Gundam Hathaway's Flash, Mobile Suit Gundam Age, Gundam Build Fighters, Gundam Build Fighters Try, Reconquista NG, Mobile Suit Gundam Iron-Blooded Orphans, the Gundam The Origin OVAs. We're not putting in the manga here because trying to rank a manga amongst all the anime stuff would just be madness, so we're just doing the OVAs. The Gundam Build Divers, Gundam Build Divers Re-Rise, Gundam Thunderbolt, and again, we looked at the two movies, so that's the ranking for that list. Not that it would really change if we had watched the ONA episodes instead. And then the last thing and the smallest thing is Gundam Twilight Axis.
Yes. We did also cover the Gundam Build Fighters OVA package on the show this year, but just assume that kind of goes in with the Build Fighters rankings. It's kind of hard to rate those on their own.
Yes, because we specifically didn't put like Gunpla Builders Beginning G in here because it's kind of more of a commercial in many ways, which makes it kind of hard to rank. But yes, I just kind of like mentally in my head through GM's Counterattack with Gundam Build Fighters and Tri-Island Wars with Tri, but it's not like it really makes a difference in how I'd rank it anyways.
Yeah. All right, so we've got 11 of these. Let's do our top 11 year 3 shows. Sean, do you want to kick us off and tell us your number 11? I have a feeling we both have the same number 11.
Yeah. My number 11, and hopefully your number 11 too, Jonathan, is Gundam Build Divers.
That's my number 11 also, Gundam Build Divers. Worst thing we watched this year. We'll find out later today. Was it the worst thing we've watched overall? We'll answer that question later, but at least for year 3, that fucking sucked.
Yeah, Gundam Build Divers is really bad. Like, it's really, really bad. It's kind of hard to even, like, just summarize simply offhand how bad Gundam Build Divers is, other than, you know, thinking about the absurdity of the, like, supposed moral quandary in the Twilight section of that show, over whether or not we want to play our online MMO game, or we want to murder a girl. Like, do we want to be able to keep playing Call of Duty online at the price of a young girl's life? Or do we say, let's just give Call of Duty a break and let this girl actually live a whole, fulsome life? Like, that's a question that this show asked, and we all got stupider for it being asked.
You know what's funny, Sean, is my brother Thomas, who is sometimes on the Weekly Stuff podcast, he's never been on Weekly Suit Gundam. He's actually watched a fair amount of the original Universal Century Gundam now, and listened to some of those early podcasts, but obviously he doesn't usually listen to Weekly Suit Gundam because it's about stuff he hasn't seen. But he heard me, or I was talking to him about how stupid Build Divers is, and I said, you should listen to that podcast because it's funny, and you don't ever want to watch that show, so just listen to us talk about it. And he did, and he is now constantly making jokes to me about the Gundam where they try to kill the little girl. And I think he has a sense in his head that it's some kind of like horror show, which would make more sense with the plot, but no, it's just a very milquetoast kind of slice of life isekai thing that just gets aggressively dumb down the home stretch.
Yeah, it is that thing where it's like, it's so hard to describe because it feels like the show has just completely lost its mind at that point, right? Like, I've just never seen a show go more bonkers than Gundam Build Divers with its tone and its whole narrative, and like just completely losing track of itself and sense of like what it is or what it's even trying to do. And that's and that, like, I think to emphasize, because this is stuff we talked about with the podcast of that show, like that is the thing that really kicks it so far down, like without any question. Like that's the thing that makes it the easiest, like at the bottom of the year 3 rankings, is that it's not just that it's hugely boring and dull for the majority of its runtime, because it is. It's that at the end it just decides to get like morally annoyingly offensively bad in that way, which is the thing that like it becomes actively bad in that home stretch rather than it just being kind of like a nothing show, which is what it is for most of its run.
Here's a question. Build Divers Re-Rise is going to be higher on both of our lists, obviously.
Yes.
Can't be lower. But we both like that show a lot. Does that show taking the fucking lemons of Build Divers and making lemonade out of it make you any more... Does it lessen your anger at Build Divers at all, or does it make you go, Re-Rise is so good, it makes me think about how bad Build Divers is more?
I think it did actually take the edge off a little bit when I was looking at the whole thing. I think there was something about, like, Re-Rise having, like, done the core premise and idea justice, meant that, like, the opportunity cost of Gundam Build Divers is less, if that makes sense. That it's not like, oh god, we spent what should be a fun, like, idea of the Isekai Gundam video game show, and we just fucking completely wasted it. If Gundam Build Divers was the only thing that did it, I think I would still have, like, a really sharp annoyance with it. I think Re-Rise taking the edge off actually makes me look back at it more quaintly, of like, oh, you stupid, dumb, little, awful show.
Yes.
Like, man, you were terrible. But Re-Rise, like, let me sort of put it in the rearview mirror. It's, like, in the past now. We've all moved on. That doesn't make it not awful, but it means that I don't have to be upset about how awful it is.
I think that's very true. That is definitely how I feel. It doesn't change my opinion of Build Divers, but it does take the edge off my general sense that it wasted my time, because that time wasting did lead to a show I love. So there you go.
Very good.
That's
anything
number 11.
Else to add?
No, Build Divers sucks. It's got a great theme song. That's about it. What's your number 10?
My number 10 is Mobile Suit Gundam Twilight Axis.
That is my number 10 also.
Yes, this is like a show that I think we almost could have just, like, gotten away with not even really considering it for the rankings because of how small it is. Because it's not like Twilight Axis is, like, actively terrible. It's just that the scope of it is so small and kind of ephemeral that it's just like it doesn't have any weight to it to compare it to anything else on this list, which just, like, means it automatically ends up very, very low in the rankings. Even if I don't, like, think it's terrible or anything, I just can't find much about it that I think is, like, that remarkable.
Yeah, I would agree mostly with that. I liked it more than you did, but I still liked it on the level of it's a kind of stylistically interesting, narratively messy 26-minute short, and I don't know how it could go above anything else on this list. And I feel like that's kind of a best-case scenario for how you would view this show.
Yeah, I mean, the fact that Twilight Axis being this weird little 20-minute short that is an adaptation of a, like, 600-page long series of 3 novels, is... The fact that it's not number 11 is, like, says a lot to the quality of Twilight Axis, honestly, because in any other list, it would, like, automatically be at the bottom just for the sheer virtue of the limit of its very, like, existence and its fact and what it is as a project. So the fact that it beats out Gundam Build Divers, which is a full 2-core, like, full-budget, proper TV anime, I think that it is, like, a lot in Twilight Axis's credit that it didn't fuck anything up. It's just, like, its whole conception is very small.
I'll say one really nice thing about it, it's got a fucking great soundtrack. That score is really good, and I would recommend people listen to it more than I would recommend you watch it, but there you go.
Yeah. It made me really want to read the novels, which is, like, the whole point of its existence. So it fully completed its objective. So no shame to have Twilight Axis be this low.
All right. Same number 11, same number 10. What about number 9?
We'll see. I feel like this might be a divergence point, but we'll see. My number 9 is Gundam Build Fighters Try.
I thought that's where you would have it. That's not my number 9.
Okay, I assumed it would be higher on your list. You know, I think my feelings on Gundam Build Fighters Try are very clear. Like, I think it's just a very kind of boring show. I think it's a show that, to me, kind of doesn't have a very clear vision of what it really wants to be, what kind of story it wants to tell, or what it wants its characters to be outside of being kind of walking anime cliches. And particularly in the sort of the time when it came out in the mid-2010s, around, like, 2014, 2015, like, the show is just such a, like, a dime a dozen kind of thing. The lame harem protagonist shit they pull with Sekai's whole gimmick as a protagonist, being karate boy who doesn't know anything about Gundam or Gunpla, doesn't seem to really care that much about it, but just is able to pull out every fight by doing a big special move. It feels like it kind of takes all the wrong lessons from G Gundam. It emulates a lot of things from G Gundam without actually getting a lot of, I think, the things that show did well. And it's ultimately just, I think, very, very dull. It doesn't know how to build up any stakes. It doesn't know how to build up a long-term narrative. And so you're stuck with, like, you know, some decent fight scenes every once in a while, but nothing that ever really kind of breaks out above a level of like, yeah, this was okay. And then there are some episodes that I think are like really bad and incredibly frustratingly bad. But there are some things in Gundam Build Fighters Try that I do like. And that's why it's, easily is better than something Gundam Build Divers. I think the soundtrack is still great. It's the same team that did the first show, so the soundtrack still kicks ass. There are some characters like Yonko that I like. I like the Romy Park character that shows up kind of in the second half of the show, mostly off the virtue of Romy Park is so good that it's like, I'm like, yeah, Romy Park's here. And I kind of wish that character just won the whole thing, because that character was kick ass. Some of the stuff with like Meijin Kawaguchi is fun. But as a huge fan of the original Gundam Build Fighters, I think Try is just a show that, like, particularly in the comparison to its predecessor, but even on its own merits, is just a show that never really rises much above mediocre, even in its best case scenario.
Yeah, I agree with some of that. I don't agree with all of it. I do like it better than you, because my number 9 is Gundam Thunderbolt. Gundam Thunderbolt, this is the most complex one on this list to talk about, I think, because it is the only Gundam here that is unfinished. It's very vestigial. Even Twilight Axis ends technically. Thunderbolt, I think if we were just talking about like the first season of Thunderbolt, I would put that above Build Fighters Try. But when you add in the second season, the Bandit Flower stuff, I think Thunderbolt the anime has some amazing stuff. It's got great animation. It's got an all-time great anime soundtrack. All of that is incredible. I want to say here, I'm talking about the anime specifically. The Thunderbolt manga is one of my favorite Gundam things. I have actually recently been reading even further into it, and it just keeps getting better. That's a really special thing that I think the anime captures a sliver of what makes that manga great, but only kind of a sliver. I love it mostly for the music. I don't think it does a great job at the storytelling. Sometimes it does a great job with the visuals and the sort of synesthesia of it all. But, I put, and I'll just say right now, my number 8 is Build Fighters Try. I put Build Fighters Try one above this because Build Fighters Try is, it's a complete thing. It has several things that I really do love in it. I think it's funny. I like some of the characters. It's got stuff like the Gundam Tryon 3 and that character on that whole side of the show that is just batshit crazy and I love. It's got a couple of really solid episodes. And, I agree that it's a more mediocre version of the Gundam Build Fighters thing, but I still had fun with it. I enjoyed it. And it lives in my memory as kind of a complete happy thing. Whereas the Thunderbolt anime is this very vestigial, unfinished kind of weird corner of the Gundam universe, and that's why it ranked at number 9 for me.
Interesting, because my number 8 is Mobile Suit Gundam Thunderbolt, so we just flipped our order on these two, which I kind of suspected probably would be where both these sat on our list. Yeah, because I think it's a thing of where, I 100% agree with you that Thunderbolt is the hardest one to rank, especially because, part of me wishes to just be able to separate out the two movies or the two seasons and be able to put December Sky higher, because I like that on its own virtue so much. Although even looking at the list, I don't even know if it would actually rise higher or not, but it would that is clearly better than the second half, but it also I think it wouldn't be fair to other things we have on these lists if we gave Thunderbolt the special privilege of being able to separate our favorite part and our least favorite part. But I think for me, why it rises above Build Fighters Try largely is on the virtue of the December Sky movie and the first half of Bandit Flower, which I really do love. I think it, even if it doesn't have the full impact of the narrative of the manga, which I haven't read all of, or I've only really read snippets of, I do think that first movie in particular gets a lot of really powerful narrative punches in, particularly with the whole thing with losing limbs and having the mobile suit be this sort of metaphor for a prosthesis and the characters struggling through that. That whole dynamic is so narratively compelling that even in a diminished form, it's really potent, and to me is a million times more interesting narrative idea than anything in Build Fighters Try. So that stuff, even in a diminished capacity, I think it really has so much more thematic ambition and structural and visual and oral or music ambition than anything in Build Fighters Try, that it just sort of comfortably shoots it above that section on my list. I think all the action in Thunderbolt puts any of the scenes in Build Fighters Try to shame. And Build Fighters Try has a couple of decent action sequences in some of the episodes, but nothing that's anywhere close to the action that's in Thunderbolt. So these are two shows, Thunderbolt and Buildfire's Try, that I think neither of them really like stick a large, like a big picture narrative that well. One because it's unfinished and kind of like compressed so much. The other because it doesn't even have the ambition to attempt to. But I'll definitely give it to the show that has at least the ambition and the gestures towards the larger thematic and larger narrative elements than the show that just kind of was very comfortable being fine.
That's totally fair. And like I said, I think if we split Thunderbolt into two, I would put December Sky one above Build Fighters Try. It wouldn't go any higher because our top 7 are fucking amazing shows.
Yeah. Sure.
But I would put Bandit Flower below Build Fighters Try. But December Sky, yes, I would probably put above. And it will have a prominent place when we rank the soundtracks. I'll say that because my favorite thing about Gundam Thunderbolt is that I have those soundtracks, and when I'm reading the manga, I usually put on the Gundam Thunderbolt soundtracks. I listen to the jazz, and it's shocking how just brilliantly that works reading the manga. Honestly, because I think some of the jazz is not used great, especially in Bandit Flower. Like, Groovy Duel is such a great song that I don't think ever gets used in its full extent in that section of the show. I just love reading it and seeing those images, so...
Yeah, because it was one of those things where last year for the second anniversary episode of Weekly Suit Gundam, we didn't update our soundtrack specific list, but because we did the songs, but we didn't do the soundtracks, right? Because so much of the best Gundam soundtracks were shows we covered in the first year of the show. But yeah, I'm excited to have that conversation for the soundtracks now that we've done all of them, especially because that is where Thunderbolt will get to have its kind of glory as a production, because its soundtrack is. Excellent.
Yep. So that's our 9 and 8. We know what they both are. My 9 was Thunderbolt. My 8 was Build Fighters Try. Reversed for you. But like I said, these top 7, Jesus, Sean, we watched some good shows this year.
Yeah, I mean, it's one of those things where it's true of this year, it's true of any of the years on the show, and it's one thing when we get to the overall list, it becomes very apparent of how good Gundam as a franchise is overall is crazy, that it makes it so hard to make these fucking lists, because you don't have a good broad spectrum of quality. You've got a couple of things near the bottom. You've got maybe 1 or 2 things that are sort of average, and then everything else is some shade of really fucking good to all-time masterpiece. And that's a hard thing to reckon with when you're ranking things in lists like this. So I'll echo that thought. That's just the preview, that all of the shows from 7 up to 1 for the year 3 rankings are all shows that I love to death, and were difficult to rank. So my number 7 is Gundam Build Divers Re-Rise.
Interesting.
Point where I pause to see if Jonathan agrees or not. So it's higher on your list. So my number 7, Gundam Build Divers Re-Rise. This was, again, all these were hard to place. And this was one that it was really jockeying for position with the show next that's going to be on my list. But I think Build Divers Re-Rise is a fantastic fucking show. It takes the whole premise of its isekai setting and the notion of GBN and really sort of incorporates it into a narrative structure that has a much stronger Gundam mindset than Gundam Build Divers does, and is able to execute on that premise so well that Gundam Build Divers Re-Rise is not just a fantastic Gundam show. Honestly, I think if I made a top 10 list of my favorite isekai shows, Gundam Build Divers Re-Rise would probably be higher than number 7 on that list. Especially because isekai shows, I think, in general, aren't always that great. But with ranking it within its own, sort of genre outside the sphere of Gundam, Re-Rise is, extremely competitive. And that was one of the things I was hugely impressed with when watching it, especially in comparison to the original Gundam Build Divers, which does not rank favorably in a list next to other good isekai stuff. But Re-Rise managing to take the premise of these people playing this video game and think of it through a narrative and thematic lens that is also very cogent with things like Sword Art Online, but it's also cogent with Mobile Suit Gundam and the other kinds of major Gundam shows that have the really dramatic stakes and dramatic and serious narrative concerns, and the way it's able to tackle core character arcs like Hiroto's character arc of struggling with this sense of loss with this digital relationship he's had, and he doesn't know how to process that. He doesn't know how to kind of bridge the gaps between his digital life and his physical life. Is such a very present, current, powerful thematic concern and thematic interest for the story, and a character arc for a main character that centers this as this is a Gundam of the modern period, right? This is the 2010s, and still fully relevant in the early 2020s. and is able to take that and make it feel like it's very powerful to what it's experiences. I think that everybody living in the very digital world we live in now will experience. If there's anything that I think like keeps it slightly on the lower side of my list, I think one thing is that like it's a little bit hard to rank next to some of the other TV shows we've watched, which some of the other ones have like are much bigger, right? So we've watched a couple of 50 episode shows this year that get to have much larger, big thematic sweeps that sometimes Re-Rise isn't able to do that because it doesn't have that full space to. It does have a couple of kind of bunk episodes in the second half that is mostly carrying the weight of the original show on its back, which is something I appreciate, that how much it's like it's a very kind show to its own history in many ways, and like saying, hey, we'll give those characters from that previous show like some like real, like a real spotlight here. But it does also mean that for a show that is a two core series, like having one or two episodes, there's like one episode and about half of another episode that I think suffer a lot from having to kind of carry some of that Gundam Build Divers weight. That's one of the things I think that kept it from moving higher on my list. And it's, I think, compared to some of the other shows, is a little bit lower budget in its aesthetic sometimes. I think there are sometimes where it struggles slightly against its budget. Not to say that it's a bad-looking show, but compared to some of the stuff above it on the list, I think some of the sense of it not being able to have the full production value of a much bigger Gundam project hurts it a little bit in the comparison. And that's like kind of the stuff that ranks it at number 7. But other than those things, I think Re-Rise is just like a fantastic, fantastic Gundam show that anyone who's a fan of Gundam would be hugely missing out if they didn't watch.
I agree with most of that. It's my number 6, I will just say. It's one higher for me.
Yeah.
And I agree with all of that. I'll say one thing I disagree with. Maybe it does have lesser production values. I love the art in this show. I love the character designs. I love, one thing that definitely pushes it above the show that is number 7 for me is that I think Divers Re-Rise has one of the best casts of mobile suits in the entire franchise, and one of the most imaginative uses of various mobile suits and combinations and new updates and all that sort of stuff. I think it's got some really inventive action scenes. I just generally like the art and the atmosphere of it. It's got a very good score, which is amazing because Build Divers 1 did not have a good score. And then it's a real miracle what having real characters in a plot will do for the music. It's something to write to. And yeah, I was just very touched by this show. I really, really love these characters. I think it being 26 episodes and being pretty tight in the message it delivers and being smaller scale for me is more of a plus than a minus, and I think is something that maybe does push it up a little bit. Again, accepting that these top 7, I really love all of them. So that's why it's one higher for me. This is a difference of degrees here between us, because I suspect that your number 6 is my number 7.
Probably. So what's your number 7, Jonathan?
My number 7 is Mobile Suit Gundam Age.
My number 6 is Mobile Suit Gundam Age. So yes, this is the same scenario. We have just flipped these in the ranking.
Yes.
They're very, very close in how we're ranking Gundam stuff so far.
Look, Gundam Age is the lowest of these 7 for me, because I do think of these 7, it has the biggest flaws. It has, I think, maybe the weakest couple opening episodes to any Gundam show that I would call a good Gundam show. It takes a little while into that first arc to really find itself. The last arc has a little bit of wonky stuff. The fourth core, I should say, has because the third core is fucking great. The fourth core has a little bit of wonkiness here and there. And I do think the visuals, this is one that does not feel as, lavish a production as like 00 or Iron Blooded Orphans, which are the big Gundams on either side of it, all of that sort of stuff. But what Gundam Age does well is something kind of no other Gundam show or TV show I've ever seen does, in the way it does this generational story over the course of one season of TV, in having the 3 main characters, all descendants of one another. You have your main character, Flit, who carries through from being a little boy to being an old man and goes on this journey of hatred and reawakening to his humanity. The way it explores the idea of humans becoming alien to each other very literally, and having to sort of rediscover a common shared humanity. Particularly, that's the strength of that third arc. And the second arc, the one with, what's the name of the second character in the show?
Asamu.
Yeah, the Asamu arc, that is just 13 of the best Gundam episodes ever made. Like, that is just a perfect 13-episode arc. Phenomenally done. It's a little up and down in places. I understand why it's been dismissed in some circles, but it definitely, this was our argument on the podcast, and I would still argue it, it has been unfairly dismissed, and it's one that really deserves sort of a critical reevaluation that I think we gave it. And it's one of the great Gundam shows to me, not as great as some of the others on this list, but that is not a sin. It's a fucking awesome show, and I really, really love it. I think what it does thematically, narratively, stylistically in some places, because I think it doesn't have the best overall assemblage of mobile suits or action sequences, but where it needs it, where it counts, I think it really does well on those things. The main Gundam Age mobile suit obviously is a total winner. This is a very special little show.
It's also got the pirate one, and I know how much you love your pirate mobile suits. So
I love my pirate mobile suits. I love the whole. This is the closest we've come to getting a Crossbone Gundam adaptation, and it is an awesome part of that third arc. That absolutely, we might hear about that pirate mobile suit on the mobile suit list. I say might because I'm not sure yet. There's a lot of fucking mobile suits from this year.
Yes.
And we have to narrow it down to 10, and that's objectively insane. But yes, Gundam Age is awesome. It's one I would love to watch again. I just maybe liked Build Divers slightly more, but I will say that is a matter of absolute degrees. They're very close in my estimation.
Yeah, because I think we were at a very similar spot. I think these shows are very, very close. I think what I gave Age the edge. Partially like having watched it twice, I think makes it a little bit easier for me to like be very comfortable in my estimation of Age, whereas like Re-Rise is very recent and I just watched it for the first time, and with Age, I just think I enjoyed that show so much on rewatch, especially knowing its whole scope, knowing where it was going and what it was doing, particularly with Flit as a main character, and being able to watch the show from the beginning with Flit being a little kid and seeing all the things they plant with that character and all the things they do, some of them very subtly, to sort of build out this person who we're going to see as an adult, and then as an elderly person, right, as a grandfather, a person who has had his entire life like dominated by hate for these people from Mars that he treats as aliens, even when he learns that they're just humans, it doesn't really matter to him. And seeing that arc, like Flit, we haven't done our top 10 Gundam Boys ranking, so I can't say for 100% certainty that he will be there. But Flit is like I have him in my crosshairs for being in that ranking, because I think he is one of my favorite Gundam protagonists, partially because of how unique he is and how much they're still able to find that character in like that little boy in the rest of the show and the rest of the performance as it gets older, and he's played by the voice actor who plays Kakashi in Naruto, whose name I'm blanking on. But like that, the wholesomeness of it, like wholesomeness, I mean like the entirety of Flit, like that sense of we get his whole life and see him and see that entire arc and see him struggle with his hatred, and then ultimately through his love with his family be able to sort of conquer it and overcome it and try to become the hero he always envisioned himself to be, rather than the sort of the destroyer he lived. Like that I found so touching. With his relationship with Kyo, his grandson, the protagonist of the final two arcs. And that's just a story that no other Gundam show has told. It's a story that like few shows ever even try to tackle. And I think I do have like a personal love for generational type stories. It's one of the reasons why I like Naruto so much, is that Naruto is completely a generational story. It's one of the things I love about JoJo's Bizarre Adventure, is that is another one of like multiple protagonists and kind of passing this torch in that concept. I get very invested in that kind of stuff, and there's something about those sort of historically minded stories that I really love, and I think Age has that quality to it. It definitely has like its weak parts, and that's for sure, and that's why it's down in 6 and 7 and not higher. So it is far from being a perfect show, but that like incredible narrative ambition and the strength of that core very fascinating character arc, and the other protagonists, Asamu and Kyu, that come along, is a thing that gets Gundam Age where it is for me on this list.
Well, God damn it. Now that we're talking about it, here's the thing. Gundam Age was the first full show we watched this year.
Uh-huh.
So maybe I'm fighting a little bit of recency bias here. I don't know if I'll...
You don't have to do anything yet, because we'll have a combined list later.
Yes. I will say for the combined list, and I might even change it before we get to my individual list. I would not fight you putting Age above Divers Re-Rise. Age is a really special show, and the more we talk about it, the more I'm remembering all the things that make it so fucking special. And Re-Rise, also a very special show, but man,
Yeah.
Age is something special. You might hear me call an audible when I go through my all shows list. I'll just say that.
Okay.
But now we're on to number 5.
Yes. So your number 7 was Age, and your number 6 was Re-Rise. It was flipped for me. So now to number 5. My number 5. This is one that was hard to rank because this is also an unfinished Gundam. Is Mobile Suit Gundam Hathaway's Flash, the first movie in the trilogy of movies that will eventually come out, but we only have the first one, making it a weird thing to try to rank. But holy shit, this movie kicks all kinds of ass.
Also, my number 5. I actually suspect our top 5 are close to the same. But yes, my number 5, also Gundam Hathaway's Flash. Phenomenal movie. It's amazing how far it is here. It's amazing how high it is on my all shows list, too, I will say, where it is up there. Being, as you say, unfinished, but it's unfinished in a very different way than Thunderbolt or something, in that if something terrible happened and they never made more Hathaway, this one movie is still a great story on its own, even though what amazes me every time I go back to it, and I've seen it like 4 or 5 times now, because I got the Blu-ray from Japan, which looks gorgeous, and it's such a fun movie to rewatch. It's basically a prologue to the actual story that will presumably start in movie 2. It's a very long kind of introduction. It's basically a, day in the life of this. It takes place over more than one day technically, but it's kind of like one day in the life of Hathaway as he moves through the world and has a brief sort of crisis of conscience and faith in what his purpose is. But it's very internal. You can tell it's based on a novel. It's a much more internalized Gundam than you would typically get from a TV show, and yet it is realized with such stupendous artistry. It creates at least one of the absolute all-time great Gundam sequences, which is them fleeing from the mobile suits in the city as they run through, leading to one of the single best frames in all of Gundam, when you have the Federation suit putting the beam sword through the other suit. Just incredible. The music by Hiroyuki Sawano is some of his best work. The animation is some of the best Gundam has ever had. It's just a phenomenal Gundam movie. And here's the thing. I'm okay hedging on it a little bit for now, because I think when the full trilogy is out, this could be like Inner Circle Gundam.
Yes, no, I agree that I agree with everything you just said. That it's a thing of, in trying to rank it, I had to struggle a lot with making sure that I wasn't just assuming that the next 2 movies are automatically going to be as good or if not better than this. And this is a part you have to struggle with in your head. It's it's still technically unfinished. And it's you need to make sure that you're not going overboard, because my instinct was to put it at least 1 higher, maybe not even 2 spots higher on this list. And I was I can't go that hard on it yet. The time to have the conversation of are the Hathaway movies maybe the best Gundam movies? That day will come. It's not yet. You need to wait for the other movies to come out. But Hathaway is so fucking good. Like you, I've watched this movie I think 4 times at this point. So I've rewatched it a lot. And I think it's got, for my money, the best action in any Gundam thing. I think how it kind of cracks the idea of kind of space in a mobile suit fight, in the sense of weight and momentum, and centralizing that within the cockpit feels like it executes on ideas that are in a lot of Tomino's Gundam stuff, but that a TV show version would not be able to execute, right? It uses its movie budget so effectively at really sort of imagining what would it feel like to be flying these giant robots almost like they're jets. It's a thing where I haven't watched all of the whole movie Top Gun Maverick yet, but just watching the little preview or whatever they showed, that was a 5-minute section of that movie, was me, that I was looking as this is fuck, did they watch Hathaway before they made this movie? I mean, obviously they didn't, because that movie was in production forever, but it's that same sense of physical place and speed and momentum, watching these mobile suits fight, and watching the people in the cockpits react, as watching footage of actual jet fighter pilots flying actual planes, like what they shot for that Top Gun movie. It's got all of that. It's got 3 of the strongest vocal performances in a Gundam thing, right? You've got Ono Kensho playing Hathaway, you've got Ueda Reina playing Gigi, the love interest, and then I'm blanking on the third one, Junichi Suabe. I can't remember the character's name, but the military guy, the Federation military, who's the sort of antagonist, generally speaking, of the movie. The sort of structure between those 3 characters and the way it explores those three characters' relationships and the performances at the heart of the movie are so strong that it's really a kind of a Gundam movie that has everything. It's got all the human drama, it's got all the action, it's got arguably Hiroyuki Sawano's best soundtrack, which is saying a fucking thing, but like I think I would still stand by that. We'll obviously have that talk on.
Can I say something about the Sawano soundtrack?
Yeah.
I don't know if on its own it's the absolute best. It could be. I'm saying I don't know.
Yeah.
I will say I've seen a lot of the stuff he's scored. I think it's the best thing his music has been put on. And that, like, I would put it above Unicorn Gundam. It's better than Attack on Titan. And that alone kind of, like, there's a level of how well it uses his music that I think Attack on Titan and Unicorn definitely rise up to. But Hathaway's Flash is just one notch better in its artistry, you know?
Yeah. So it's just a fucking amazing movie. And I'm so excited for the sequels. It's like, I'm really excited to get the rest of it. Because, as you say, like, it is a movie that stands very much on its own terms, but it is also clearly a prologue to a bigger story. It's a movie that is going to have sequels. And so there's a chance that in some future episode of Weekly Suit Gundam, like 4 years, however the fucking long that'll take, when the trilogy is done, that this could be in like literally could be in the top 5 on my overall list, is where it could be if the other movies are as good, if not better than this one. It's like in contention for being, as you say, like top Circle Gundam.
Yep. Right now they're saying the second movie is going to be called Son of Bright, which would be a very funny title, I think. But yes, in any case, Hathaway's Flash, wonderful. What's your number 4, Sean?
My number 4, I'm curious, I think this might be a place where we diverge. We'll see. My number 4 is Mobile Suit Gundam, The Origin, the OVA series.
That's also my number 4.
Okay, so I wonder if we have the exact same
I think
top
we might have the same top 5.
Yeah.
Yeah. Gundam The Origin is great. It's fantastic. I will just say for me, it's not even that there's anything The Origin does wrong, and there's a couple of little things The Origin does wrong here and there. That 4th episode isn't the best. But honestly, it's just because the top 3 are all very unique Gundam things that stand on their own, and The Origin it's maybe the best prequel I've ever seen to anything. It is an add-on, an addendum to existing stories, and that's the only reason it doesn't rise higher. It is a phenomenal production. It has some of the best voice acting you'll ever hear. It's got our boy Char doing the most evil Char stuff Char ever does. It's an absolute fucking delight. I would just say there's some Gundam shows with a little more substance and meat on the bones, but there's nothing against Gundam The Origin. It rocks.
Yeah, I think that it seems we have the exact same thoughts here of, like, Origin is so good, but there's almost, like, a ceiling as to how high it could go on a list like this with the nature of, like, what it is of being a prequel.
Yeah.
That it's, like, it's just hard to give it the same kind of weight as other things above this list that are doing things that are wholly original and different with Gundam. And Origin is amazing, but what it's doing isn't necessarily different. It's an elaboration of things we know and have seen about with this character, Char. It is an incredible elaboration, right? I mean, it's still number 4 on this list, so it is phenomenally good. But it being an elaboration and that being the kind of the nature of the project sort of prevents it from being from breaking into the top 3 here. But it's like some of the most fun I've had on the podcast, I think, is doing those and the choice to the very good proper choice to do individual episodes for each of the OVAs rather than making the unicorn mistake is what I think of it. It's either that or the Eva movie mistake. Like, let's do all of these in one episode. We're dumb. That was incredibly fun. And then topping that off, even if like the manga doesn't factor in here because the manga is its own thing and it would be too hard to try to rank here. Like doing that in unison with me reading through the manga was incredibly fun. So getting to rewatch stuff I hadn't seen and read something or watch something I'd already seen before while reading something I hadn't in the world of Gundam was a fun experience. So some of my favorite times on the podcast this year was doing those Origin episodes because it's just something that Origin is one of the most fun things to talk about with a Gundam fan, right? It's just, you can get so completely behind it. It's fucking Char and Shuichi Ikeda at his slimiest, just dunking on people, doing his crazy fucking sociopath murderer shit, and it is an incredibly good time. and has a bunch of really powerful emotional stories at the core with Sayla, with Ramba Rao, and Hamon. Like that, like Miki Swashiro's performance as Hamon. Can't put a thing on here without mentioning Miki Swashiro. So good. Like, the voice acting top to bottom is incredible. The recast and the returning actors are all so good. You know, Megumi Han's performance as Sayla is kind of unbelievable that it's even is a recast. That's something I'm really excited for the Kukuru's Doan movie, because we'll get more Megumi Han Sayla, and that's going to be an absolute treat. But yeah, Origin, I don't know like what else there is to say about it. It's just so fucking good, and it's like it's the dessert for a Gundam fan is what Origin is. That's what it kind of feels like.
I was going to say something similar, and I'll give you a little preview of my all shows list, Sean. The Origin OVA and the 08th MS team are right next to each other because I think about them very similarly, which is that there are maybe Gundam shows that have a little more meat on the bone for me. But in terms of just fun dessert Gundam to watch and to talk about, because I agree, had so much fun talking about the Origin, and the 08th MS team is one that is one of my favorite conversations we've had because just such a blast to talk about. I think of those two kind of in a similar circle for me. And I think that's the kind of, and that's great. That's a circle that I very much love, have some of my favorite Gundam stuff in them. But yeah, that's one thing you'll see when you get to my all shows list.
Yeah, I'm looking at my list, and mine is like very close to that, to where 08th MS team is, and I think that's a good assessment. That I agree that there's a similar, distinctly Gundam fan pleasure from both those shows. That, you know, there's nothing wrong with dessert. It's delicious for a reason.
And 08th MS team, Gundam the Origin OVA, that's like that fucking the dessert you get at a fancy restaurant that is like costs way too much, but then you eat it and you're like, oh no, I understand why I paid that money. That's that kind of dessert. It's great.
Yeah.
All right. That's your number 4. I am 100% positive we have the same number 3. What's your number 3?
My number 3 is Mobile Suit Gundam Iron-Blooded Orphans.
Jesus, what? Okay, no, we don't have the same number 3. My number 3 is Build Fighters.
Interesting.
Okay. This is fun. I will just... Is Build Fighters your number 2?
Yes.
My number 2 is Iron-Blooded Orphans. We did it again. Okay. So
what is our number 1?
What is our number 1? I'm glad we agree on that number 1. If you didn't agree on that number 1, I would have hit you. Okay, no. Yeah, well, let's explain it. You give me your logic. They're both great shows. That's the basic bottom line. They both rock.
I think one of the things with Gundam Build Fighters is the most difficult one I had to rank. Because it is so different than any other Gundam thing, but it is also so good, right? Yes. It's like if G Gundam was one of the best Gundam shows, how the fuck do you rank it, right? Rather than like G Gundam is great, but it's also not in the upper echelon of Gundam shows. It's just a very good time. Gundam Build Fighters is not just an all-time great Gundam show, it's like in contention for me personally as being maybe the best sports anime I've ever watched. Like, it's, and I haven't seen everything, right? But I've seen a good number of, like, a bunch of, like, the classic shows. Like, I really need to watch Haikyuu, because everyone loves Haikyuu so much. But putting it next to stuff like Slam Dunk and Kuroko's basketball, you can probably tell that I played basketball in high school because I watched the basketball, or in middle school, and a little bit in high school because I watched the basketball sports anime. Like Chihayafuru, which is a big one, stuff like that. Gundam Build Fighters compares so favorably amongst those. It is maybe personally my favorite of these. And I do have like a unique vantage on Gundam Build Fighters because I watched the show before I had seen any Gundam stuff, and then several years later watched the Gundam franchise, almost having forgotten it. So I have seen it both purely as a sports anime and then as a Gundam anime, and then watching it for the podcast. So I had seen it at least 3 times. And so I think some of that stuff makes Gundam Build Fighters uniquely difficult to rank somewhere on this list. And so I think there's something about I wanted to edge it higher personally because of that in a way that, like, I wanted something that was so unique but so excellent to that kind of gives it an edge almost. And I think that's why I ranked it above Iron-Blooded Orphans.
I have no problem with that. Yeah. I honestly, Sean, coming into this, was worried I was going to have to convince you to put Build Fighters a little higher because I thought you might have put... But no, that's fine. Because Build Fighters is a fucking perfect show. There is no bad episode. There is no bad scene. There is no bad fight. There is no bad character. It is I think its ambitions in some ways are lower than an Iron Blooded Orphans, but on the other hand, maybe its ambitions are higher because what it's doing is fucking nuts, which is being a sports anime with an existing franchise's plastic model kits. Like, what a weird idea it comes up with, and it just nails it at such an absurdly high level of execution. It is so fun to watch. And it has a real substance and message to it that is not your normal Gundam substance or message, but it's a substance and message that I think resonates in sort of daily life in a sports anime context to a really powerful degree. This is where I would maybe, and I have it above the Origin, you have it above the Origin, I think we're both going to have it above 08MS Team, and I think that's a good example of this has a lot of those Gundam dessert qualities, but I also think it has a level of execution on the point of like who the characters are, what they learn over the course of the show, what it has to tell the world about the value of hobbies and hobbyism in general, and the eternal anime theme of friendship and those things. And also, it is one of the funniest, most perfectly executed comedies you'll ever see. It is just such a sharp, razor sharp piece of writing for 26 episodes, and it is so delightful and funny. The Gundam Build franchise has been kind of up and down over the years since then, but even if they had made great shows for all the other ones, I don't think they ever could top the original Build Fighters, because you can't top perfection, and they did it perfect the first time.
Yeah, I think I believe it's episode 8, the Bear Guy episode of Gundam Build Fighters is like the most perfect episode of anime I think I have ever watched. Like, it is so perfectly structured plot-wise, because there's a plot structure called Kisho Tenketsu, which is a Japanese, it's also like a Chinese plot structure that's a plot in 4 acts that's like introduction, continuation, twist, and conclusion, which is similar to like 3-act structure or like introduction, rising, action, climax, and denouement in the Western storytelling structure, but it's slightly different in nuanced ways. And it's like, if I had to teach Kisho Tenketsu to people, like, I would have them watch that episode and then walk through the steps, because it's like, it is so razor sharp, absolutely perfect at its narrative structure, in a way that is incredible. And yeah, it's just a show that has everything. It's got amazing action. It's so creative with all the different mobile suits with all these crazy powers, and setting up the tournament structure, and it's the antithesis of Build Fighters Try, which has no idea how to do setup and payoff. Like, Build Fighters is textbook setup and payoff. It is so good at introducing you to characters and ideas and locations and themes in the first few episodes, and then slowly developing those until in the back half you've got the big tournament where now we get to see our main characters collide against all these other people we've been setting up along the way. It's one of the most satisfying structures for any kind of show to do a tournament thing, and Build Fighters is one of the best tournaments I've seen in anime. Like, it's so razor sharp perfect on that focus. The humor is incredible. Whether you are new to Gundam or you're a hardcore fan of Gundam, the humor works for both those kinds of fans, which is incredible. Because if you are coming to it new, you're seeing it through the eyes of Reiji, who is like sort of exasperated and confused by all like the nerdy Gundam shit, and so the humor is all calibrated to operate effectively through that lens, and it's still super funny, laughing at these like crazy characters talking about nonsense like an Abawaku and what the fuck does that even mean. Or if you know all your Gundam stuff, you watch it and you see it through the eyes of Sei. And now, like, you're laughing because you're like, yeah, Gundam is crazy. And isn't it ridiculous that I, like, in this insane rant this character just went on, that I understood every single word they just said? So it can get that kind of love and joy of a fan watching it, as well as it being, like, hugely entertaining for someone who doesn't have that background. Like, that's a magic trick I don't think I've ever seen any other show like this in a long-running franchise that banks on the nostalgia and the affection for the franchise as much as Build Fighters kind of does, but it doesn't need to have that. You can love it anyways. That is a incredible achievement and an incredible magic trick. And then also it's got one of my favorite soundtracks, including the OPs and EDs. Like, it's got some of my favorite openings and endings, especially also the insert song in the Jim's Counterattack OVA when Reiji comes in. It gets me very emotional every time I listen to that song, because I love those boys and I just want them to be friends forever. But then also the Yuki Hayashi score throughout the rest of the show is so adventurous. I adore the use of flamenco guitars whenever Meijin Kawaguchi comes in. Also, Meijin Kawaguchi was created in the show, and he's an all-time great Gundam character. All the weird, like, the countdown, like, weird techno voice in the main battle theme before the battle starts up, and you go, 5, 4, all that shit. It's just one of the most bonkers soundtracks, and it's so much fun. Gundam Build Fighters is a 10 out of 10, 2 thumbs up, all-time great show. And that's why it's my number 2. But we also
Totally
have to talk about my number 3.
Yeah. Iron-Blooded Orphans. I'll tell you, okay. I don't know if I could explain to you the logic between putting Iron-Blooded Orphans above Gundam Build Fighters. They're so fucking different. I will say, we're going to have this conversation also about where Iron-Blooded Orphans ranks in the overall pantheon. Mm-hmm. And the thing that I keep coming back to with that show, for ranking here, for ranking there, is the ending. It's the last couple of episodes. Mm-hmm. It's what happens to the main, spoilers if you haven't seen it and are listening to this for some reason. And specifically, the line of dialogue written by Mario Okada, that I think is one of the best lines of dialogue in the history of Gundam, and maybe just my favorite, is, what's the main character's name in this show?
Which one? Orga or Mikazuki?
Mikazuki, sorry.
Okay.
Yeah, Orga and Mikazuki. But you're correct. Both main characters, it is a dual protagonist structure. But Mikazuki's final line of dialogue, where he says, "I used to have nothing, and now my hands are overflowing with precious things." The rough translation. I think is a contender for the best written line in all of Gundam, and the one that made me burst into tears hardest in the history of this franchise. Iron-Blooded Orphans is an imperfect show in places. I think both seasons have some pacing issues here and there and whatever, but I think they absolutely pale in comparison to just the strength of the overall cast of characters, the uniqueness of what it is trying to do, the identity that this creative team, the Super Peacebusters, and particularly Mario Okada as the writer, brings to this show. It is it's very informed in the history of what Gundam is, but it is so unique in tackling the issue of war orphans and child soldiers and, private military companies and all these things that are sort of, perennially around the periphery of Gundam, but don't ever get as full a treatment as they do here. This is a more brutal show than Yoshiyuki Tomino could ever fucking dream about. But it is also a more hopeful show than something like Victory Gundam. It is amazing how it finds hope in death and in hardship and in terrible things. And I think there's just Iron-Blooded Orphans lives bigger in my heart with every passing day. I think it is such a unique and wonderful thing.
Yeah, no, I mean, I love it to death. Again, like, these were two I really struggled with ranking, because these were two, I'll say, that I swapped back and forth on their ranks quite a few times looking at the list, because it's just like, how do you rank these two shows next to each other? One is a happy, fun sports anime with a very empowering theme about, like, the joy that hobbies can bring to your life, and the other is like this intensely dark show about child soldiers and orphans where all the principal characters are killed, or most of the principal characters are killed by the end of the show, and it is about these like very dark, frictious, difficult to grasp and like confront concepts about the like war and violence and like money and privilege and the way that these things enter our lives, and how there are people whose lives are destroyed by war, but for whom war and violence is also the only means by which they can express themselves and express power on the world around them, and they can shape it. Like, those kind of two shows are not shows that should be on a list together. Unfortunately, the task we have in front of us is that we have to both rank these fun sports anime and the child soldier show. Like, that's just the nature of what they happened when they made Gundam Build Fighters. And they're both so good because, yes, like, Iron-Blooded Orphans is an incredible Gundam show. It ranks very, very high in my overall list. Also, and it's just one where I think my experience as like a high school teacher in particular on rewatching the show, because the first time I watched it, I wasn't a high school teacher yet, although I had done some work in high schools. I didn't have my full license at that point. Like, it really did change some of my relationship to the show in a positive way. Well, positive in that I like the show more, negative in that it made me sadder. But yes, it's that thing of where I think the core themes about the show, about children who live on the margins of society, obviously within the setting of Iron-Blooded Orphans, is very extreme. That is these children who live on Mars and they are orphans and they are, basically more or less slaves for this PMC corporation. Some of them are literally slaves, the human debris characters. Like, that's a very extreme scenario. But all the themes and the ideas and the relationships that connect those characters also like symbolically work perfectly for children who live in our world in a less like extreme and exaggerated scenario, but are also children who live in a marginalized sector of their lives, right? Who might be homeless, who might live in families that are abusive, or families that they are impoverished, and even if they have a loving family, that family can't be there for them all the time, can't contribute to their education, where someone who's 15 has to start trying to work jobs and to take care of siblings. Like all that kind of stuff is stuff that if you work at a high school that's not like super rich kid high school, you're going to deal with that kind of stuff on an effectively daily basis. So like there are lots and lots of kids I met working that remind me a lot of, especially like the characters around the edges, less so Mika and Orga, who are very extreme characters, right, and are very kind of polarized on this spectrum that they exist on, but like the normal characters that make up the larger cast of Tech Kadan, the PMC group that the kids make, remind me so much of kids I actually met and teenagers I worked with teaching. And so that strength of the writing and of the overall direction of the show, of keeping in mind that this is about kids and it's about kids who live on the margins of society, and how both that is tragic, but also seeing it through their eyes, and how important it is to like give them power and give them agency in their own existence in the world that they live in, the world they try to make for themselves. Because I think it's very easy when you are someone like Maribit, who is the older woman who kind of gets assigned to them, right? Like I think I see a lot of myself in that character, and it's very easy when you're in that more privileged adult position where you have a more comfortable life to sort of look down from on high on these other people and these kids and judge them, or like try to tell them this is what is best for you, this is what you have to do, but lose sight of like the actual life that they lead and the things that they want and the world that they can see in front of them, which is much more limited than the world you can see because of your experience, the things that society has afforded you that has not afforded them. And that frictious relationship is such a powerful thing, and it's so perfectly explored. I don't think I've ever seen any piece of media really kind of navigate that exact quagmire the way that Iron-Blooded Orphans does, and it kind of forms the heart of the show to me, of you getting on these kids' sides and it just completely breaking your heart every step of the way that this is the kind of thing that they have to do, but it's also a thing that they find meaning in. So I feel like this is kind of like a rambling explanation of what I like about Iron-Blooded Orphans, but it's just that kind of core message is so powerful. And the rest of the production of the show, from like the other stuff like the soundtrack, the action, all of that is all calibrated perfectly to tell this story about these characters. And, there's a reason why I think talking about Iron-Blooded Orphans, and we'll talk about this when we get to songs on the next episode, that talking about Frisia and the lyrics to Frisia and the symbolic meaning of the flower Frisia, which in flower language or whatever, like the word flower words, it's a Japanese cultural concept, means innocence and purity, that is the closest I've come to actually like breaking on to tears on the podcast, because it hits for me very personally. So yes, Iron-Blooded Orphans is an all-time great Gundam show, and one that, how the fuck do you rank it next to Fun Sports Boys? I don't know. I put it at 3 and then put that at 2, but I think it just totally makes sense to also put that at 2 and put Fun Sports Boys at 3. What a crazy fucking list to have to make.
And I just want to stress how out of this world spectacular the home stretch of Iron-Blooded Orphans is. And I mean, it's true of the end of the first season of it also, but at the end of the second season, I think that the number of pins they've set up that they start knocking down, the abject hopelessness of the situation they get themselves into because McGillis Farid is the dumbest person in space. And that character, just one of the all-time great Gundam characters. Yes. Oh my god.
I don't know. He's the dumbest character in space because his world is narrow in the exact way the kids, because he didn't escape that life either. That's one of like the great masterstrokes of the home stretch of this show, is like the way that psychology extends to him also in ways you didn't expect that make perfect sense, right?
But yes, and I think there's just such a deep adult, mature understanding of the way power works in a messy, brutal, but also kind of necessary way in the home stretch of this show, and that good things can come out of absolutely horrible things, and like there's no easy way to feel about it. There's no way to walk away from this and be like, that was a happy ending, that was a sad ending. It's an ending. And it's not an ending. It's life. There's something about that. I recently watched Mario Kata's first movie, where the flower blooms. I forget the main title.
Makia.
Yeah, Makia. Brilliant movie, and also made me realize how much of a like Iron-Blooded Orphans is just not a work-for-hire Gundam. It is very much her voice in the writing and those of the other Super Peacebusters, obviously, as well. But like you see how many of those themes come through in other stuff she's written. I'm also watching her loop in the third show. You know, it's also just one of the most unique voices outside of Tomino that's ever tackled one of these.
Yeah, and that was one of the fun things for me, kind of having watched a bunch of her stuff beforehand, and going in and rewatching a bunch of it before I rewatched Iron-Blooded Orphans. It was fun to sort of get to see it specifically through that creative lens, because yes, it's one of the most powerful and distinctive creative voices that has worked on Gundam, and it's one of the things that's very special about Iron-Blooded Orphans.
And yet, it's not our number one. It's not even your number two, because our number one, the G of Genki, is the G of, I forget how it all goes, but there's a lot. The G stands for a lot of things.
Yes, I can't remember the lyric right off the top of my head, but yes, we're talking about Gundam Reconquista in G, or G no Reconquista, which is our number one show. This was the one where like I started making this. I'm like, well, let's just put that up at number one, and let's figure out the rest of this. The rest of this is going to be very hard. But G no Reconquista, you get to be number one here, baby.
You get to be number one, and you're going to be in the inner circle on the all shows list. It's and it could even rise higher, not higher than number one here, because there's nothing higher, but in the all shows list over the years as I think about it, because man, it is the most euphorically brilliant anime production I've ever seen in terms of just formal mastery. Watching Reconquista in G, I could watch it with the fucking subtitles off, and I would be in awe of the clarity and speed and relentlessness of the visual storytelling going on here. Is it confusing? Abso-fucking-lutely, but in the most euphoric, like, amazing way possible because of what Yoshiyuki Tomino is doing in pushing the medium and the language of anime out to its limits. This is a show that has been so influential to my thinking that parts of my dissertation are inspired by conversations we've had on it. I've got a planned chapter in my dissertation that is basically a chapter where I will talk about how brilliant G no Reconquista is. It's just like, I think this show, it's hard to talk about because it is slippery and it is weird and it is such a big, massive thing Tomino is packing into 26 small episodes. The best comparison I can come up to for it is David Lynch's Twin Peaks: The Return, of a auteur later in their life coming back after a period away and just kind of showing everyone else to school. Like, it is like both a mastery of the basics and then blowing the doors off the fundamentals and doing all sorts of new things with the medium that I don't think we've ever seen before. It's one of the best Gundams. It's one of the best TV series ever made. It's G no Reconquista.
Yeah, it's the G of Genki is the G of Hajimari. That was the lyric you're looking
That's
at.
why it's hard to remember, because there is no G in Hajimari in that way if you spell it in. Yeah.
Yes, it is. Yeah, it's just an all-time great anime. Just like no qualifiers attached needed for that statement. And particularly for like the modern era of digital animation, something obviously we talked about a lot on that podcast episode about it. It's so invigorating to watch as a big fan of anime, and has seen a lot of modern anime made in the late 2000s and through the 2010s and now early 2020s, where we're like full in the swing of HD like digital animation, and it can end up having a very samey kind of boring aesthetic in a lot of stuff. And you see that in some Gundam shows. You see that in like Gundam Age, which is a show I love, but I don't love the art style of Gundam Age. That's like one of the weaker parts of that show. And there's a lot of stuff from that period that kind of has that like, it's fine kind of look to it. And then Reconquista in G just comes in and says, we can do anything. Like, it's digital, man. Like, let's just fucking blow the hinges off of this and just rethink the entire aesthetic and presentation of what we're doing here. And I love to death the pastel color palette of Reconquista in G. It's just so gorgeous. It looks completely unlike anything else. The character designs are just perfect. They have this incredibly classic feel to them while also being something different. They don't just look like Turn A Gundam characters or Mobile Suit Gundam characters. They are like G-Reco characters. And they just crafts this whole own visual identity, the way that they use like digital effects to supplement a lot of like the lasers and the particles that the G self emits when it flies and stuff like that is utterly jaw-droppingly gorgeous. The music is incredible and captures that like very unique energy of G-Reco. But the big thing about G-Reco is obviously the like bonkers like nature of the narrative and the structure and how it tells its story. The like Tomino on like fucking speed nature of the we are just going to cram what feels like is like 1,000 episodes of anime. Like we're cramming One Piece and we're putting it into 26 episodes. It's like it's the most compressed, intense narrative experience you can get, where you have to be laser focused on it at every single second, and it awards that attention, and it is arresting in the way it grabs your attention. But it's like it takes you by the collar and says, hey motherfucker, watch this thing and get that brain working, because you're like putting everything together and you're just so swept up in the experience of sort of creating the show with it as you're watching it, which is like the hyper Tomino experience, something you see in all of his previous works, but G-Reco puts it up to a degree that is just like, for a lot of people, is unfeasible. And it's like it's the thing where it's not at all shocking to me that I think a lot of Gundam fans would not put this at number one on their list. And I understand why there's a lot of people who don't like G-Reco. But I think if you are on the vibe of Tomino and you're on the vibe of G-Reco, it is completely and utterly singular as a piece of TV anime. And then also eventually, you know, when the movies are done, we'll get to watch the movies and assess those as well. But it's just completely unique, and it's something that easily that is my favorite podcast that we've done, certainly this year, and it might be my favorite podcast we've done in all of Weekly Suit Gundam, because it was the most show that we needed to do a podcast on. It was one of the ones in my original list of when we eventually do Weekly Suit Gundam, or like if we ever do a Gundam podcast, I need to talk about the original Mobile Suit Gundam, I need to talk about fucking Turd, and I need to talk about G-Reco. And that's like, it was one, and Sea Destiny was one I needed there, but that's in a different way. G-Reco was one of those I desperately needed to talk about and bounce off ideas about this show and have a conversation about it and like a dialogue about this show, because it's a show that demands that kind of dialogue. And it's a thing that most media doesn't have, that level of kind of sophistication and complexity and kind of like richness to it that G-Reco has. And I'm very, very happy that is, I mean, it obviously is both of our number ones on this list.
Yeah. You know, you said something earlier, and I want to clarify, because I think I know what you meant. You said Hathaway had the best Gundam action, and I think you meant in a technical sense of how they realized it in 3D space.
Yes.
Gino Reconquista has the best Gundam action in terms of its storyboarding, its conception, its flow, its pace.
And like the consistency across like episode to episode is very different than what Hathaway has to do, yeah.
Because Gino Reconquista is a show about kineticism and movement, and that is often through mobile suit action, but even just in the way characters move through the world and talk, it is a show about action. And that is why you have to, like, this is the least appropriate casual viewing show of all time. You have to be like dialed in 100%. But I used the word euphoric earlier because that's what it feels like to me. It's the same way Twin Peaks The Return was. That's a show you have to pay hyper attention to, and sometimes Twin Peaks, unlike Gino Reconquista, is sometimes very slow, but that attention to me isn't exhausting, it's euphoric. It's like this thing I am absorbing is making me a fuller person for having my mind altered and expanded by what it is presenting to me, you know, and Reconquista has just the added benefit of, you know, Tomino personally storyboarded most of the series, and it has an attention to detail, a fiddly, minutia, nuanced attention to detail that is the most Yoshiyuki Tomino thing he has ever done or probably will ever do. Just the sheer amount of time spent making sure we see the airbags every time, making sure we always see the fucking contact leak between the mobile suits. It's stuff that's been there since the beginning, but I feel like just became the whole show in the best way, you know?
Yeah,
so much of what we're talking...
The very necessary revelation that the seats, the cockpits are also toilets. Like,
yes.
Yes.
Indeed. And, you know, so much of what we're talking about is aesthetics, but this is a show where style and substance are the same thing the entire time. And the substance is immense, because this is sort of a road trip through the world, and it is a story that is also meta textually about how stories actually exist in the real world, which is that there aren't any. There is a complex set of multivalent, perspectives and motivations and intentions going on between messy fucking humans and messy history. And the only way to affect change or live in this world is to go on the journey for yourself and try to understand it, which is also the thing through its aesthetics and its style Gino Reconquista tries to imbue in the viewer. And it makes you kind of watch the show the way it is also saying people should live in the 21st century. It is a brilliant, brilliant piece of art.
Yeah, it's a complete masterpiece.
Easy number one.
Yep.
Less easy. How do we rank all 33 of these motherfuckers?
Yes. So then the hard task came for both of us, Jonathan, to take the 11 shows we watched for year 3 and then fit it into our existing list. And obviously, I assume you made modifications to your existing list, as I did, and left us ultimately with 33 shows / OVAs / movies, like 33 Gundam projects overall. I should say that we have, for this time, we have now separated out Unicorn and Narrative, which used to be combined. And partially as like a kind of holdover from that's kind of how we handled it in a podcast sense. And now Narrative has been separated out. So that's one of the ways we're now at 33 total items here. And we have each made our own individual rankings. So we'll each go through our individual rankings. And then we'll have to have a conversation about how the fuck we combine them and make the overall podcast list.
Yes, this was hard, Sean. I will say I'm very happy with my top 10. Because I feel like that's like the inner circle, like your fucking desert island Gundams. I would be happy with that as my top 10. It gets harder and harder as you go down, except at the very bottom, which was easy. Yeah, there's a lot here, and I am more interested in how we do sort of our combined rankings at the end, but I am also curious to hear how we've both done it individually.
Yeah, because I'll say that this was a very hard thing, ranking all of these. It was something that, when you put it all together, it makes you realize, like, just how good the batting average is for Gundam overall. Like, I would say probably starting at my top 20 are all like just like great shows / movies.
I agree.
Like, it's just like, that's crazy. Like, it really, when you have to rank them out, it makes you realize there's no other franchise I'm like a fan of that is old like this, that has so many different elements to it, that is this good so consistently. Like, I love stuff like Star Wars and Doctor Who, and stuff like that, and all of those have much longer like fallow periods and stuff like that, and there is not a fallow period in Gundam. Anytime there was a show that was kind of a miss, it's like either airing simultaneously to or right next to a show that's like incredible. So it's just all throughout the scope of the 43 years at this point of Gundam's existence, what a ridiculously good franchise Gundam is. And it just, I encourage people who are listening to the podcast, if you have not made your own list, I think it's an interesting exercise to do, because it really puts into perspective how much Gundam is just fucking amazing.
Yep. So, Sean, do you want to go ahead and read our lists out, and then we will start to do our combined rankings?
Yes. So let's do that. I'll start with my list and just go through the list. So this is an exciting moment at the bottom. This is maybe one of the most exciting places on the list. I had to do a lot of thinking about this one, and my number 3 is G Savior, with my number 2 being Build Divers. I ultimately couldn't do it. I couldn't. Build Divers is still an anime, and even an awful anime is still better than a 90s made-for-TV live-action movie. Like, it's just by its sheer essence. I had to do it.
Well, let's just talk about this really quickly, because that's also my 33 and 32. I agree. The ultimate tiebreaker for me is that Build Divers did give us Re-Rise eventually.
Exactly.
And G Savior gave us nothing. God damn it.
This is a thing I wanted to say we were talking about. When you asked me that question about Build Divers and Re-Rise and what my response was, I wanted to be able to talk about this, but I couldn't, because I didn't want to spoil the most exciting placement. Everyone was like, is G Savior going to be overtaken? And ultimately, no. But I think probably just because Re-Rise took the edge off. If Re-Rise did not exist and did not take that edge off, I probably would have put it at 33. But because I'm not mad about Build Divers anymore, I'm just sort of annoyed by it. It's at my 32. So anyway, so let's get back to the list. So 33 G Savior, 32 Build Divers, 31 is MS Igloo, 1. My number 30 is Mobile Suit Gundam Seed Destiny. My number 29 is Mobile Suit Gundam Twilight Axis. My number 28 is Gundam Build Fighters Try. My number 27 is Mobile Suit Gundam Narrative. My number 26 is New Mobile Report Gundam Wing with Endless Waltz also combined. My number 25 is Mobile Suit Gundam 0083 Stardust Memory. My number 24 is Mobile Suit Zeta Gundam A New Translation. That's the movies. My number 23 is Mobile Suit Gundam MS Igloo 2 Gravity Front. My 22 is Mobile Suit Gundam Thunderbolt. My 21 is Mobile Fighter G Gundam. And now is where we enter the top 20. This is where the rankings become very, elusive. My number 20 is Gundam Build Divers Re-Rise. My number 19 is After War Gundam X. My number 18 is Mobile Suit Gundam Age. My number 17 is Mobile Suit Gundam F91. My number 16 is Mobile Suit Gundam Unicorn. My number 15 is Mobile Suit Gundam The 08th MS Team. My number 14 is Mobile Suit Gundam Hathaway's Flash. My number 13 is Mobile Suit Gundam The Origin, the OVA series. My number 12 is Mobile Suit Victory Gundam. My number 11 is Mobile Suit Gundam Seed. My number 10 is Mobile Suit Gundam 0080 War in the Pocket. My number 9 is Mobile Suit Gundam Iron-Blooded Orphans. My number 8 is Mobile Suit Gundam Double Zeta. My number 7 is Gundam Build Fighters. My number 6 is Gundam Reconquista in G. My number 5 is Mobile Suit Gundam Char's Counterattack. My number 4 is Mobile Suit Gundam 00. My number 3 is Mobile Suit Zeta Gundam. My number 2 is Turn A Gundam called Turn A Gundam. And my number 1, was number 1 at the beginning and is still number 1 now, the reigning champion, Mobile Suit Gundam.
Oh God. It was really easy at the bottom. We were the same for a little while. This is going to be a lift, Sean, to debate all of this. Let me go through mine. I'm having heart palpitations at figuring out some of these differences, but it'll be fun. My number 33 is G Savior. My number 32 is Gundam Build Divers. My number 31 is MS Igloo number 1. My number 30 is Gundam Seed Destiny. My number 29 is Zeta Gundam A New Translation. My number 28 is Gundam Wing. My number 27 is Gundam Twilight Axis. Number 26, 0083 Stardust Memory. 25, MS Igloo 2. Number 24, Gundam Thunderbolt. 23, Build Fighters Try. Number 22, Gundam Narrative. 21, After War Gundam X. Number 20, Mobile Fighter G Gundam. 19, Gundam Seed. 18, Gundam Age. Number 17, Build Divers Re-Rise. Number 16, F91. Number 15, Hathaway's Flash. Number 14, Gundam The Origin. Number 13, the 08th MS Team. Number 12, Unicorn Gundam. Number 11, Victory Gundam. Number 10, Gundam Double Zeta. Number 9, Gundam Build Fighters. Number 8, Gundam 00. Number 7, Iron-Blooded Orphans. Number 6, Reconquista in G. Number 5, Char's Counterattack. Number 4, Zeta Gundam. Number 3, 0080 War in the Pocket. Number 2, Turn A Gundam. And number 1, the original Mobile Suit Gundam. Let's put both our lists into that Google Doc, Sean.
Yes, I already put mine in.
Okay, let me see if I can find it here. You put it at the bottom here, okay.
Yeah.
I'll take point on writing these out for us. Let's look for points of agreement, Sean. Let's start there. So,
yes. Well, the easiest is at the bottom.
Easiest at the bottom because it's identical. Yes.
Yes.
So I will take 33 through 30, which are identical, and I will plop those down on our combined list at the top here. And then our number 1 and 2 are also the same. Right?
Yes. Yeah, so Mobile Suit Gundam and Turn A as the top 2. Yes.
Where do we go from there in the great debate?
Can
I ask some? Let's just start by understanding each other's lists.
Okay.
Gundam 00 still extremely high for you. Iron-Blooded Orphans.
I basically didn't change the top 5 from the last one.
Interesting. So we had at the end of the Iron-Blooded Orphans podcast a little debate where I asked you, what's the best AU Gundam show? Is it Iron-Blooded Orphans or is it 00? And we both said I don't fucking know. We can't answer that yet, right?
Yes.
I thought about it long and hard. They wound up, you'll notice, next to each other on mine. And
Uh-huh.
I wound up putting Iron-Blooded Orphans one above Gundam 00. Now, I will fully admit, there's a certain degree of recency bias there. Mm-hmm. And I love Gundam 00. You will hear, obviously, there's no flaws in... Like, I actually think Gundam 00 is the better series in terms of, like, if I look at which show has more points where I might quibble with something. I think for me it was just the strength of the ending of Iron-Blooded Orphans and the sheer uniqueness of what it's going after that raised it above for me. But I will say right now, I am perfectly happy to put Gundam 00 above it, and the fact that it is quite a bit higher on yours means I think magnetically it might get pulled in that direction, but I wondered if you wanted to explain a little bit.
Yeah, I mean, I think everything outside of my top 3 in terms of the top 10 is relatively tight. There's like... So I would be comfortable with moving 00 lower. But Iron-Blooded Orphans versus 00, it's a very hard question. I think they're very, like, again, I think like a lot of my like 10 to 4 are very similar in quality to me, and it's kind of like a coin toss sometimes because it changed quite a bit, the specific ordering. But yeah, I think ultimately it is a thing of, I think Iron-Blooded Orphans is a more flawed thing overall. 00, and that's kind of what you said, the 00 is more kind of like precise and more perfect. Not to say that is without any flaws at all. Although 00 getting Awakening of the Trailblazer gives it this very like interesting, frictious, kind of flawed, strange epilogue almost that kind of puts it a little bit more stylistically in Iron-Blooded Orphans' territory in that sense. And that's kind of like, I think, where those two shows hang in my estimation. One is more flawed, but maybe, in those flaws you see something very special. The other one is a little bit less flawed, but is very kind of precise and ordered and feels very kind of masterful in how it is constructed as a full piece. The nature of 00 Gundam, its overall structure, moving through these different kind of styles and phases of Gundam through its first core, second core in the movie. There's something so elegant and like so perfectly considered about its overall structure that's one of the things that I think made it a hard thing for me to budge when I kind of took my old list and I looked at my old list, started fitting things in, and then started moving things around. And I just found that like 00 was a hard thing to move because of how like kind of like rock solid that show is.
So I'm thinking about just the top 10 here, and I'll give you right off the bat, Sean. I would be happy to put Zeta Gundam at number 3. My number 3 is War in the Pocket. Your War in the Pocket is lower. I am amazed that we've come to the point where you are arguing War in the Pocket is overrated. But okay.
Iron-Blooded Orphans is better than War in the Pocket. Let's have that conversation. I think Iron-Blooded Orphans for me is very solidly better than War in the Pocket.
War in the Pocket is still my top 3 have not changed since year 1. I love War in the Pocket. I think it's a perfect 2-hour anti-war movie, TV show, whatever you want to say. There is a sheer elegance and punch to it that I think it's fucking perfect. What I was going to say is I would be happy to put Zeta at number 3. I think that's an easy one for our combined list to do Zeta at number 3. So let me go ahead and do that right now. But yes, then we do have the other arguments to do. Another one I will say, Reckon Gistinji is above 00. I don't know how to... yes, Reckon Gistinji is above 00. I will argue for that.
I'm fine with that. Sure.
Yeah. But it seems like we both put Char's Counterattack above G-Reco, so I think Char's Counterattack probably is number 4. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
I'm fine with that. Yeah, that's 4. I'm fine with Reco G being 5 then.
That is fun. I like putting that. There's something to me about putting that at number 5, and just kind of flipping our lids at everyone who wouldn't do that. But yes, okay. But let's look at other points of commonality here. That means that we have to rank here. We have War in the Pocket. We have Iron-Blooded Orphans. We have Gundam 00. These are all ones that are obviously going to be in the top 10 because they're in both of our top 10s. Build Fighters Double Zeta.
Top 10's the same, just with a different order?
I think so.
Because Double Zeta, Build Fighters, 00, Iron-Blooded Orphans, G-Reco, Char.
They are.
Yeah, Zeta. Yeah, so they're the same, just with different orders. That's interesting.
Yeah. So okay.
Like that.
Yeah, that makes sense. Okay, so the top 5 that we have right now were Gundam, Turn A, Zeta, Char's Counterattack, Reckon Gista. I think that makes sense as a combined because I think we have a lot of agreement on that.
Yes.
Then we have these other 5. So again, our that's actually let's talk about that for a second, Sean. Our top 10s are the same, just with different rankings.
Yes.
That's fascinating. That actually shows that there is a. I think you and I have the same desert island Gundams. If we were saying you can only take 10, we took the same 10. And what I like about this is I think these 10, and I will say for me, having my 10 in whatever order, I liked that it's a good cross-section of Gundam. There's a big, healthy dose of Tomino in there, but there's also 2 AU shows that are very different. There is 1 OVA in War in the Pocket. There's Build Fighters, which is completely different.
Yeah.
You know, there's a lot, and there's 1 movie in Char's Counterattack.
Yes. Yeah. So it's a good cross-section overall of the Gundam experience.
I was going to say...
So we both have Build Fighters above Double Zeta. So I think that's like...
That's easy enough, yeah.
Yeah, an easy thing to say. Like, wherever they fall, relatively, those 2, Build Fighters is above Double Zeta.
Yes. We have... we both had Build Fighters above Iron-Blooded Orphans, No, we didn't. I had it below Iron-Blooded Orphans. You had it above Iron-Blooded Orphans on both lists. There's a lot... Here's one thing I'll say, looking at all of this. I think Gundam 00 is number 6. I love it enough. Mm-hmm. You had it very high. I feel like that's fair to put it number 6. Does that make sense?
Yeah, that makes sense to me.
Yeah, because that's relative to the other ones. I think that one makes sense. I think the question is, how low am I going to let you put War in the Pocket?
I would be fine with doing 7 Iron-Blooded Orphans, 8 War in the Pocket. That works for me.
Then I wonder if Build Fighters is too low suddenly.
Yeah,
I will say you don't...
the game of this list.
The game of this list. You do not have Double Zeta at number 10. I feel like that might be an easy one to put at number 10 because it's still in the top 10, but we're not fighting over it. I don't know. It depends on what you think.
Yeah, so...
You had Double Zeta above Iron-Blooded Orphans and above War in the Pocket.
Yeah, I mean, it's one of those things that you have to think back to Double Zeta because it's been a long time, but like, you just... Whenever I have an instinct to like, oh, I could put Double Zeta lower, and then I just have a flash of the Colony Drop episodes in the middle. I'm like, well, yes. I don't know. Can you put Double Zeta lower?
I think Double Zeta is lower than these other 3 we're putting it against, but that's not insulting Double Zeta. I just don't think Build Fighters, IBO, or War in the Pocket have a Moon episode or something like that.
That's true.
So that's where Double Zeta is number 10 for me. Still... inner circle. I think 10 is the inner circle, right? So, yeah.
Yeah, I'm fine with that. I'm fine with Double Zeta being 10 on the combined list.
And then maybe War in the Pocket at number 9?
Sure, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
I'm budging a little bit for you here.
I thought we would have a fight about Build Fighters versus War in the Pocket, but if you want to just elide that completely, I'm good with it.
I'm okay with it because I don't know if... Here's the thing. I kind of like the idea of having Build Fighters kind of high on the list. I think it's kind of it's funny and it's also cool. Yep. I would be okay with separating. I would be okay with putting Iron-Blooded Orphans 1 above War in the Pocket. It's not what I would do, but I think maybe it reflects our combined lists better. And I think our sheer enthusiasm for Build Fighters being put at number 7 is fun. I'm okay with that. When I put it out on the list here, what we would have is 10 Double Zeta, 9 War in the Pocket, 8 Iron-Blooded Orphans, 7 Build Fighters, 6 Gundam 00, 5 Reconquista, 4 Char's Counterattack, 3 Zeta, 2 Turn A, 1 OG Gundam. I like that list. I personally would flip IBO and War in the Pocket, but I like that list.
Yeah, I think for me, I feel strongly about Iron-Blooded Orphans being above War in the Pocket just because I think that Iron-Blooded Orphans like take on like the proximity of like children to war is much more interesting to me. Like, not to say that like War in the Pocket is bad. Obviously, it's still top 10. But I think like for me personally, Iron-Blooded Orphans tackles more interesting thematic material ultimately than War in the Pocket. Partially because Iron-Blooded Orphans is a much bigger thing, so it has the space to do it. But that's kind of like why I think it's the 2 things that are mostly like this is a kid next to war, and like this is what that story is. Like, I think Iron-Blooded Orphans just has a much more kind of like interestingly frictious kind of relationship to those concepts.
And look, they're all great. I'm totally fine with that. And then I think just because I think Build Fighters was, where was it on mine? It was number 9. Okay, so it went up a little bit for me, but you also put Reconquista and G up for me. So I think this is a good combined list. I think, and either way, obviously the 10 in any rank reflects our shared opinions at this podcast because we had the same 10.
Yes. Yes.
Yeah.
And then the same top two. The same top two was the most, like, Mobile Suit Gundam Turn A is the most unmovable fucking thing on any list. Like, it's just, it can't be breached, it can't be broken. It's like, it's just, you can't do anything with that. It's just a rock at the top of the list. And you have to, and everything else is built underneath that rock.
Yes. We have 20 other shows to rank. Looking at them, I think one very easy one we can do right away is Victory Gundam at 11, because I have it at 11, you have it at 12. I will fight for it being higher than Seed. You're going to have to lower Seed a little. I'm going to have to raise Seed a little. I think Victory being 11 makes sense in our combined
I'm totally
estimation.
good with that. Like, Victory is the little show that could. I don't if you remember how much that show just, like, kind of grew in the second anniversary list, because it went higher, I think, on our collective list than it was on either of our individual lists.
It's a great show. It's a
great show.
It's a messy show. It's a prickly show, but it's unfucking forgettable. That's for damn sure. All right. Then we got a whole bunch of other stuff here. I don't know. Do we take this from the bad end or the good end? What's easier at this point?
Let's move, because we've been at the good end for a while. Let's move back down to the bad end.
Okay. So now we have it all the way up to 30, 33 through 30. Now it's 29. That turn.
Yeah.
What you did next was Twilight Axis. What I did next is Zeta Gundam, a new translation. One thing I'll say right off the bat, I am happy putting a new translation anywhere. It's just really hard to rank.
Yeah.
Because there are things I really like about a new translation. Yeah. There's just, it's messy and weird, and I guess I just favored stuff that was all original, but it's weird. It's really hard to rank.
Yeah, I think my reasoning for where I put it, because I have it at 24, which is to me kind of like the boundary between sort of bad Gundam and like good Gundam, but that it ends up in the great Gundam category. I think for me, my reasoning there is the same reasoning I used in the second anniversary episode, which is that like a weird kind of awkward movie version of Zeta Gundam is still better than a lot of other Gundam, right? Like, that's how good Zeta Gundam is that the weird fucking movie thing, even if you fucked with it, and they do fuck with it, it's still better than a lot of other Gundam stuff. So it's like, I kind of can't push it too low for me personally, just because it's like, I just remember having a really good time watching it, even if while I was watching, I'm like, man, this is fucking weird, and some of these choices are bad, and they fucked up the ending. Although, because I had already known that before I watched the movie, it didn't really bother me that much, because it's like, I just kind of ignored it, but...
So we're fine putting that a little higher. Let's see. There's some I would put Stardust Memory above it, and we'll talk about that in a second. But one thing I did right away, Sean, is I think 29 should be Twilight Access. That's where you have it. I only have it like a spot or two higher. And look, it's a weird vestigial little thing. I'm happy with it not going higher than 29. So I think that's an easy gimme. Then we have, let's see what shows we have in common here, Sean. We have Gundam Wing. We have Stardust Memory of MS Igloo 2. We have Thunderbolt, Build Fighters, Narrative, all in the top 20 for both of us. So what is next after Twilight Axis? I feel like, looking at the two lists, the next lowest thing on both of ours is Gundam Wing.
Yeah, like, I'm fine with Gundam Wing going below Build Fighters Try. I'm fine with making that sacrifice, even if I do personally think that Gundam Wing is better than Build Fighters Try.
I'll give you one thing. Build Fighters Try is half the length of Gundam Wing. Gundam Wing is a 50-episode show, lest we forget.
But
and it gets worse as it goes along.
Good episodes, which is half the length.
Good-ish, yeah.
Build Fighters. That first 13 episodes are decent.
They're decent, yes. They're like good popcorn Gundam. Okay, Build Fighters Try is going to be a discussion here. And I will admit, between two things that I have higher than you in the top 20, or the 20 to 30, not the top 20, is Narrative and Build Fighters Try. If I have to pick a pet project here, it will be Narrative. It will not be Build Fighters Try. I'm okay letting Build Fighters Try fall if I can keep Narrative a little higher.
Yeah. Like, I definitely think that Build Fighters Try should definitely not be above Gundam Thunderbolt.
That's fine.
That's how you have it on your list.
And then there's stuff like MS Igloo 2, Stardust Memory. Where do we put some of these?
Yeah, again, I would put both of those above Build Fighters Try.
Okay.
I don't know how you feel about that.
Let me type out which ones we're talking about here. So we're talking about Stardust Memory. We're talking about Build Fighters Try. We're talking about Thunderbolt. What else here? I would put narrative above all of these. I think you have it in the middle of those, but
yeah, I don't feel strongly about narrative. Like, I think
Okay.
it can be above those. I think it could be below those. Like,
That's
that
fine.
doesn't. I don't really have like a.
yeah.
It's just like narrative never really has made an impact on me, like really one way or the other. I'm very neutral on it.
That's fine. MS Igloo 2, and we also have, what's the other one here that I am missing? We have Zeta Gundam New Translation. Okay.
Yes.
So let's rank these
that
puppies
block.
here. Yeah. Zeta Gundam New Translation. So this block, what goes highest, what goes lowest? There's some tricky ones here.
Like, I'm fine with like Zeta Gundam New Translation falling a lot from where it is on my list, just because I think like the reasoning of like it's just like weird movie versions of Zeta Gundam means that it doesn't have much of like value to add to Gundam, because I don't think it has anything really of value to add to Gundam. I just sort of enjoyed watching it.
So I'm looking at our two lists, and you had MS Igloo 2 just above Zeta Gundam A New Translation. I had it pretty high also. So I think of this batch of 5, I think that one clearly goes the furthest.
Yes.
And I would put it above Zeta Gundam A New Translation. I'll just tell you here. So I would put Stardust Memory above Build Fighters Try either way, I think. And I think Thunderbolt above Build Fighters Try I have absolutely no problem with. And then Zeta Gundam A New Translation, let's let that fall to 27 because we're disagreeing on it and it's weird and yeah. Okay, so that one's 27. I think Gundam Build Fighters Try at 26 I'm fine with. And that is high. I got it a couple spots up.
Yes, you got it above Gundam Wing. You know, you should be happy about that.
Yeah. I also don't feel super enthusiastic about it one way or another. Okay, Thunderbolt versus Stardust Memory. How did we both have that one ranked?
I think I had it above. Yeah, I had it above Stardust Memory.
You had it above. You had Thunderbolt above Stardust Memory?
Uh-huh, yeah.
I did too, didn't I? Okay.
Yes. Yeah,
then
you have
we
it
do
at the top of that set.
Okay. So then let's do Stardust Memory above Build Fighters Try. Stardust Memory, we've talked about it. It's got some infuriating things. It's also got some of the nicest Gundam animation and music. So I always want to fight being too mean to Stardust Memory just because it does have good things in it.
Yeah, but it's just the ending is so bad, the ending. It really poisons the well on that one so much. It becomes hard to fight for it,
Yeah. Okay, so how we have this now is 23 MS Igloo 2, 24 Thunderbolt, 25 Stardust Memory, 26 Build Fighters Try, 27 Zeta Gundam New Translation, 28 Gundam Wing, 29 Gundam Twilight Axis.
That seems pretty good. With this. Yeah, and if you wanted to put narrative at 22, which is where it is on your list, like, I don't really have a problem with that.
Okay, I would be good with that. I am going to put Zeta Gundam higher because I'm looking at it, I'm like, no, it's even bad Zeta Gundam is better than Build Fighters Try.
Yes.
And frankly, it's better than Stardust Memory. I'm going to put it at 25. I think I would put... Yeah?
Yep.
Is that where you had it?
I had it at 24, but it is above the things. Yeah.
Because
my Build Fighters Try is in a different spot, so that's why it's...
I'm fine with that. And then,
spot,
and then I do think it makes sense to have Thunderbolt and MS Igloo 2 above Zeta Gundam New Translation because I think they're doing enough unique original stuff that they would go above it, right?
Yep. That works for me.
Okay. And Narrative at 22 was my little pet project. I don't know. I've rewatched Narrative a couple of times, and part of it is the Hiroyuki Sawano of it all. That man can elevate some stuff, and I think Narrative has its messy bits. I totally understand that. I think it's also got a heft to it at the end that I found touching, and I rewatched it recently and found that again. So there you go.
Sure. I mean, I haven't watched it since we did the podcast on it because it just didn't impact me. So I'm fine with giving that weight since you watched it more recently.
Yeah. There's a block of shows after that on your list that I think are also in this block for me, and that is F91, Age, Gundam X, Build Divers Re-Rise, and Mobile Fighter G Gundam. Let me go check. I think I also have Seed in this category here. You hold Seed in higher estimation than I do.
Seed's
I still like. Yeah, that's fine. I'm fine putting Seed higher than that block. And I have basically, yes, in that block I have all of those and Seed. So let's talk about these 5 next, because those will be the next 5 either way. Because I'm okay putting Seed above F91. And it's so much higher on yours that I think it'll even out to that. But yeah, so now we have basically 21, 20, 19, 18, 17 in some order. I'm looking at these. I put F91 at the top of these 5, and I probably put.
Also.
You did too? Okay. Yeah, that makes sense. Because I had F91 one above Build Divers Re-Rise. That was actually a tough one for me, but yes. Okay, so F91 is at the top. Then we have Age, Gundam X, Re-Rise, and G Gundam. I think I have G Gundam one above After War Gundam X, but I'm fine in either order with those. I think one of the questions is where we put Build Divers Re-Rise. You had it in between G Gundam and Gundam X. Yeah. It seems like we both agree with Age being higher than all of those, though. So F91 and then Age makes sense because we both did that.
Yeah, that's good for me. Yeah, because I think for me it was a big one for me when I was ranking my list is After War Gundam X or Re-Rise better? And I ultimately went on After War Gundam X, but I would be fine with flipping those if that's something you feel strongly about.
I think I do, and I'm okay with putting Mobile Fighter G Gundam at the bottom of these because I know you. Not that you want to bash that show. I just mean I know that's a. I'm okay if I can get.
Yeah, that was one of the ones that on a rewatch hurt my estimation. Yeah. It's like one of the few ones that I liked less the second time I watched it, and so that kind of hurts it when I rank these. Even though I still love it, I still really enjoy that show a lot. It's just, it's the flaws of that are kind of hard to work through on a second viewing.
Yeah, no, I understand, and I think this actually makes sense to me as a list a lot because what we'll have is we have G Gundam, then Gundam X, then Build Divers Re-Rise, and then Age right above that, and that actually feels exactly right to me. From the conversation we had earlier, because I was even thinking about how I probably would wind up putting Age higher. But then we also have Build Divers Re-Rise above Gundam X and G Gundam, and that is my honest feeling about that. I think it's a little. I love Gundam X, man. What a great underrated show. But it is maybe a little, rushed at the end and unfinished in some ways.
That second half is like the thing that really holds that show back,
Yeah, and I think Re-Rise, and also, here's one other thing I'll say about Gundam X. It's playing with a lot of original Gundam themes in super interesting ways, but Build Divers Re-Rise is kind of doing a lot that's new to Gundam and doing it really well. So
Yeah, I like that. Yeah, I think that's a good argument and a good ranking.
Okay, this is easier than I thought it would be. We now have 6 shows left, because we have everything ranked up through 17, and then we have a top 11. So let's list out which ones we're missing here. We're missing Seed. We're missing
Unicorn,
O8MS Team, Unicorn,
Hathaway,
Hathaway's Flash, and O8MS. No, I already wrote that one. Gundam the Origin, and then there's one more.
What else do we not have up there?
Or am I doing the math wrong?
You might have been doing the math wrong. I guess I can't see what else.
Oh, yeah, no, there's 5. 17, 16, 15, 14, 13, 12. Yeah, okay, that's fine. We have it right. There's 5.
Yes.
Because 17 minus 11 is 5. Okay. Anyway, let's see here. So, you had Seed at the top of this. I had Seed below any of this.
I mean, I had Seed above Victory Gundam originally, but I'm fine with putting Victory Gundam higher.
You have Unicorn lower than the Origin. And I will just make the fight for, I do think Unicorn is the stronger series than the Origin. I think, and it's kind of on something we were talking about earlier with Origin versus some other stuff of, like, both of these shows are about Gundam history to a certain extent, but there's something about Unicorn being an original story with new characters and new stakes and stuff like that I do think, in the same way we talked about with Gundam the Origin versus some other shows, does elevate it for me. Also has that Hiroyuki Sawano score. When I'm looking at both of our lists, I do think the thing we uniformly maybe had the highest here was Hathaway's Flash. Is one I don't know if I would be comfortable putting that all the way at 12 right away. But those are some opening thoughts I have.
I mean, I think here's a twofer that I kind of feel strongly about. I think Hathaway is better than Unicorn. I would argue for that, just in the sense of I think it is a more interesting version of. Now, this is not to put down Unicorn. Unicorn is very good. But I think Hathaway is a more interesting version of what happens after Char's counterattack than Unicorn. And I like its whole style and aesthetic and approach and sort of themes and stuff like that. And in that way, and that's where, for me, when I was ranking the list, that was a pretty strong. I thought Hathaway was better than Unicorn.
I am fine with that. And I certainly think if we're hedging on there are going to be 2 more of these, I don't think there's any doubt that Hathaway's Flash will be above Unicorn in the completion. And I wouldn't say I like it as a presentation of post-Char's counterattack world better. I think here's what I think. Like, Hathaway's Flash is the more realistic of the two in terms of what would happen after Char's counterattack. And I think Unicorn is the more sort of spiritual and optimistic of the two. And I'm glad that both exist. They don't necessarily exist in the same continuity in my mind. I see a fork there. But I do like that we have both visions of the world after that.
Yeah, I mean, again, Unicorn's very good. And it's like
Yeah.
I'm happy that we have both of them, but they're like two interesting ones to put next to each other because they also I think Hathaway's Flash, in just in terms of the direction and the execution of the aesthetics overall. Like Unicorn's good, but Hathaway's Flash I just think kind of blows everything up in a way that feels like it's it's where Unicorn is heading to eventually is Hathaway's Flash, and I think Hathaway's Flash to me has an epiphany kind of quality to it as a piece of Gundam that makes it more impressive to me.
What about Unicorn versus the Origin, which I said my piece on earlier?
I'm fine with having Unicorn higher than the Origin. Yeah, I had Origin higher in my list, but I don't feel hugely
You don't have a
strong
strong
about that.
Yeah. One thing I'm seeing right away is I feel like, because it's not coming up in the conversation, 08MS team is maybe at the bottom of our combined list here.
I think I'm fine with that. I had it relatively low in this set. I had it above Unicorn, but I had Unicorn the lowest of this set. So
yeah,
I'm fine with it dropping.
Okay. Just because I feel like it's the one that, I mean, we love it. It's amazing. It feels like the one that we're going to talk about the least and fight about the least, in which case maybe it goes the lowest of these.
Yeah, I think in terms of the dessert thing, that and I think I like Origin's dessert flavor a little bit more than 08MS team.
Then maybe that's 15.
Yeah.
And then we fight over these last three. Okay, I think that works. So then we have Seed, Unicorn, and Hathaway's Flash. I think we said in the positionality Unicorn is going to go below Hathaway's Flash, and I'm okay with that. And then it's just a question of Seed. And, one day I do want to revisit Seed, because Seed exists in my memory as kind of a bifurcated show where it is a first half that is kind of boring and weirdly animated. The whole thing is weirdly animated. And then it blows up into one of the most compelling Gundam shows ever. And so I kind of put it in the same zone as an Age or a Re-Rise or a Gundam X or something like that. You put it much more near the top of the pile. And obviously it's going to end up closer to that here. But do you want to say your piece about Seed?
I just think there's a je ne sais quoi to Seed of its approach to trying to take a lot of the core elements of original Gundam, but really push forward with it. That is fun. That I think it helped shape what AU Gundam is, right? AU Gundam used to be, let's do Mobile Suit Gundam, Zeta Gundam, and Char's Counterattack in some sort of format, and just throw that in a blender and just do it again. And Seed has its thing of where it has a similar setup to First Gundam, but structurally in terms of its narrative, it's not particularly similar to First Gundam in any meaningful way. Gestures,
and it makes a complete break at the midpoint to
yes.
Completely blow that up. Yeah.
And there's something about that to me that is very invigorating, and I think it's a show that's so important to the franchise. I think you can feel that importance in its construction, and it's one that it's one of those that upon rewatching it, I liked it so much more, because I think the first time I watched it, I had the same issues you had with the first half, but when rewatching it, I think it was easier to see what they were doing with Kira's character, particularly what they're doing with Locus, which I think Locus is a really tricky character that is hard to get your mind around early on until they do the big reveal that oh, she's actually kind of masterminding this thing, right, for the good guy's side. She is the one who's manipulating the scenario to try to find a way out of this war. And I think she's one of the most interesting Gundam characters. I just think Locus is amazing. I think Rie Tanaga's performance as Locus is all time, and it's just that character is so deceptive in a way that I think it's she's almost too deceptive, that the trick I think works so strong on the viewer. You're not aware of all the things they're sort of setting up in the background, showing that what she's doing is very deliberate, showing that she's basically pulling a Columbo. She's acting the weird, oh, where am I? What's going on? Kind of the ditzy thing, but really she's poking and prodding and pushing things in the way she needs it to go. So I think just Seed is a much smarter show than most Gundam fans give it credit for, because I think most Gundam fans look at it as they put a bunch of like early 2000s anime teen drama in my Gundam. And it has that stuff, and I like that stuff for what it is. I also think it gets credit for being a Gundam show that actually has like the main character have sex. Like it deals with that stuff very directly. It's not afraid to sort of write around those ideas. It's not afraid to write around the more adolescent and sort of like sexual qualities of adolescence that the protagonists have, that like a lot of other Gundam stuff has to be more sort of secretive of, or sort of like suggestive of, without actually just going for it. So that kind of teen drama element of it, I actually like quite a bit of Seed. But the thing that I love most about it is that I think it's a very smart show that knows exactly what it's doing. It knows exactly what blocks it's setting up. Like, is it perfect? No. It's got all the weird flashbacks. It's got that early 2000s anime style that is not particularly flattering, particularly now. It has aged hugely terribly in a visual sense. But it's got a kick-ass soundtrack. And it's got a very wicked, smart story that, to me, kind of like made the floor through which shows like Double O Gundam and Iron Blooded Orphans would be able to take off and help evolve the Gundam series and the franchise in a totally different direction.
Yeah, and I like hearing you talk about all of that. I will just say for my part, the things that, and I agree it's an extremely smart show. That's the point I think you and I have no disagreement on. It uses the Gundam iconography and story pieces and blows them up in a really interesting way, and I think it has a very powerful last act in particular. For me, when I'm putting it against some of these other shows, like Hathaway's Flash, Unicorn, The Origin, 08MS Team, I don't have a particular fondness for most characters in Seed. I think I agree with you about Lacus intellectually, but I don't have like a real spark there. I think Kira is interesting as a symbol of a character more than he is as a character. I think that about a lot of the cast. I don't think it has, partially because of the time it was made, it does not have anywhere near the stylistic heft of Hathaway's Flash or Unicorn or The Origin or 08MS Team. And all of those things do combine to put it more to me in the Gundam Age category. And Gundam Age actually, I think, does some of what it's doing better. And that's why I had it one above Gundam Seed. So this is just one we're never, I think, going to see perfectly eye to eye on, for now at least.
Yeah, I'm going to say I disagree so much on the cast. I love the cast of Gundam Seed. I think that, like, Kira and Athrun and Lacus and, like, Ramius, the captain, Natarla, are great characters. Izak, the Tomokazu Seki character on Athrun's side, is a super memorable character. I think that they're super memorable. Like, I love all the random characters. It's, to me, one of the best crews and one of the best, like, post-original, like, set of Gundam stuff, post-Tomino kind of Gundam, like, ship and crew and, like, a full cast of characters and, like, Mu Laflaga. And it's like, you gotta put the Seed Destiny out of mind, right? Because it's like, okay, Seed Destiny takes all those characters and fucks them.
I understand.
That's not Seed's fault.
It's not Seed's fault, but it's also like, if the reverse is true, where we say Re-Rise takes a little bit of the heat off Build Divers for us, I would like to live in the world where I could say I can completely compartmentalize my mind, but if I'm being honest, the fact that Kira Yamato in Seed Destiny is, to me, the worst Gundam boy. I don't think it's even a contest. I don't like the kid in Gundam Build Divers, but he is a blank. Kira in Seed Destiny is one of the most spiteful, awful characters in all of Gundam to me. And it is, especially without like sitting here and rewatching them again. And you have the benefit of having done that, and I understand that. It is very hard for me to go to back to Seed and be like, yes, intellectually, Kira in Seed is not responsible for what Kira in Seed Destiny did, but I am a fleshy human who cannot perfectly compartmentalize those things. And I don't have that problem with Unicorn. I don't have that problem with Hathaway. I don't have that problem with The Origin or 08MS Team or F91 or Age, some of these others that I'm saying that with. And so I agree with you in principle that Seed Destiny should have no bearing here. Emotionally it does, and I don't know how to, and I'm just trying to be honest about that.
Yeah, but I think it's just a thing of, you haven't been able to watch Seed again after having Seed Destiny to be able to compartmentalize it, because I think I kind of had that fear when I went in to watch Seed of like, will me knowing that like Mu Laflaga is brought back in Seed Destiny in the most haphazard way, will that ruin his character death in Gundam Seed? And for me, it didn't. I think it was very easy, partially because Seed Destiny is just such a terrible sequel that doesn't know what it's doing at all, that it feels like it's a completely different show. Like, it's almost mind-blowing to me in some ways that it's made by the same creative people, because it just feels like it's a show that, like, so lost the fucking thread that it just doesn't feel like it exists in the same dimension as the original show to me. And, like, So that, for me, rewatching it, I found it very easy to compartmentalize those things and see those characters through the light of, this is the Gundam Seed version of Athran and Kira, and yes, in the sequel, they are fucking idiots, and they are awful characters, and they are frustrating and annoying, and all those things. But that's a different show. It's not Gundam Seed. I don't think that Gundam Seed should have to pay for the sins of its awful sequel. Like, I let you put narrative higher because you had watched it again.
I know, no.
Did that too.
Sean, I've already given you 5 places on Seed. We're not talking about... I've already given you from... I had it at 19. It's going to be minimum 14. It's going to be higher. What I was going to say is I do think we should put Hathaway's Flash above it. And I think Hathaway's Flash is number 12 between our conversation on it.
I'm fine with that.
Okay. Sure. And then I will give you, because I know you feel very strongly about it, I'm giving you more than I'm given here, Seed at 13 and Unicorn at 14.
Okay. I'm Unicorn is really high on this list compared, to be clear. Unicorn for me was at... Oh, so actually, no, was it not that much higher? Oh, so it was 16 on mine, so it moved a couple of lists up.
I gave you same as last year. I'm giving you a lot on Seed.
I gave you G-Reco. I moved double O
out
of my top 5.
Okay. That's fine. G-Reco fucking... It's G-Reco, though. It's a fucking masterpiece.
Yeah, it's fucking Gundam Seed. It's like one of the best AU shows. It fucking defined what AU would be in the 21st century.
I guess it defines some elements of it. If thank God it didn't define it like stylistically and in terms of animation, because that would have been really bad.
I mean, nothing was made in that style after 2005 anymore. Like, it was the rough period for anime.
It is a rough period for anime. I think there is also, I'm not a huge fan of the character designs and some of that stuff in Seed. I don't think it has a particularly interesting, visual aesthetic beyond the bad early digital animation, which, yes, everything in that period has bad early digital animation. There's other shows from that period, though, I can look at and go, I like the underlying art of this more. But this is all
Seed's
personal.
The very wide heads with the very big eyes is also a very early 21st century anime aesthetic.
Yes.
Nobody draws characters like that.
Yeah. So, okay. I got narrative higher and you got Seed higher, which I feel like you won in that competition.
You have
but that's
Seed
okay.
criminally low in your list. That's your fucking problem, not mine.
I guess I do find things that Gundam Age is doing vastly more interesting than anything Seed is doing. Even at my highest appraisal of Seed, I would put something like Age above it. But that's okay. This list is all about compromise. Yes. Just like a marriage, podcasting is about compromise. All right?
Yes, and sometimes your partner will be wrong about something that seems very obvious, like the ranking of Gundam Seed, and you just have to accept it.
I'm curious. Tell us I have a feeling that the podcast community is more on my side on this one. So, you can let Sean know that. But then also tell Sean the things you're on his side about.
G-Reco. G-Reco is has a 5 out of 10 on my anime list, which is...
Well, they're wrong about that.
Basically a trash show in that opinion. So I'm just saying, appealing to the crowd isn't a convincing argument for me.
You're absolutely right. Overall, looking at this, Sean, is there anything you would challenge or want to massage from the list that we have made? I'm pretty happy with it.
Yeah, I'm pretty happy with it. I'm looking at our individual lists to see, because I think Hathaway's Flash went. Yeah, Hathaway's Flash climbed quite a bit higher in the combined estimation, which I think is interesting. I think Hathaway's Flash did kind of a Victory Gundam thing that happened last year, where it's just it just kind of goes rising up, which I think is fair. I think it's that thing of on our individual lists when we did the year 3 only stuff. It's Hathaway's Flash is a thing that is hard to compartmentalize how you rank it next to stuff, because it's one of 3.
It didn't go crazy high. I had it at 15. Yeah. You had it at 14.
But I always like that. I like that stuff in these kinds of lists of what is the thing that in the weird compromises in the fusion process. What is the thing that goes shooting up? Or that
Double O did that. Double O did that last year. For both of us, and I think we wound up. I think last year Double O was number 3 overall. I think we've now decided canonically that goes to Zeta Gundam, and that's fine. Zeta Gundam is Zeta Gundam. So
yes, our combined list did have Double O above Zeta Gundam. I don't even remember that. I pulled up the list because I had it on my Microsoft Word document. I don't remember that at all. I don't remember that.
I'm happy with this.
Yeah.
I think especially if you ignore the exact numbers and go more for sort of the vibes of the rankings, I think this is a super good combined list that very clearly reflects our overall shared opinions, especially the top 10, because it's the same top 10 for both of us.
I mean, Seed is the only thing I think we have like a significant disagreement on. Like, narrative would be the closest thing. But I don't think you're not like going super hard for narrative, and I'm not like super against narrative either.
I would like it marginally higher than Thunderbolt and MS Igloo, and it's it's fine.
But other than that, like our lists are really like very similar, which I find fascinating. Because I didn't expect our top 10s to be identical. I thought that there would at least be one or two things that would be different.
Yeah. Well, should we go ahead and present it to the people now, our full top 33?
Yes. So let's go ahead. Do you want to go back and forth reading them, Jonathan? Yes.
Starting at the bottom, our number 33, the canonically worst piece of Gundam is G-Savior. Fuck you, Canada. God damn it. Japan should declare war on Canada for what they did to Gundam. God damn you, Canada.
Fucking Canada. Number 32, the second worst Gundam show of all time, is Gundam Build Divers.
Number 31, MS Igloo 1. Honestly, I almost feel like I'm picking on it. It's just nothing. It's nothing.
It's a museum piece, quite literally. Number 30, Gundam Seed Destiny. You fucking goddamn fucking show.
Probably in a technical sense worse than MS Igloo, but it's more interesting to watch because of how bad it is.
Yeah.
Yeah. Number 29, Gundam Twilight Axis. It is, in fact, a thing.
Number 28, New Mobile Report Gundam Wing and Endless Waltz.
Number 27, Gundam Build Fighters Try.
Number 26, Gundam 0083 Stardust Memory.
Not quite the winner here, is it? Number 25, Zeta Gundam, a new translation.
Number 24, Mobile Suit Gundam Thunderbolt.
Number 23, Mobile Suit Gundam MS Igloo 2.
Number 22, Mobile Suit Gundam Narrative.
Number 21, Mobile Fighter G Gundam.
And number 20, After War Gundam X.
Number 19, Gundam Build Divers Re-Rise.
Number 18, Mobile Suit Gundam Age.
Number 17, F91. Little show that could. I love that it's still in the top 20. I just love that.
Yeah, I mean, that's an easy to be in the top 20. Fucking F91 is great. Number 16 is Mobile Suit Gundam, the 08th MS Team.
Number 15, Mobile Suit Gundam, The Origin.
Number 14, Mobile Suit Gundam Unicorn.
Number 13, Mobile Suit Gundam Seed.
Number 12, Mobile Suit Gundam Hathaway's Flash, or just called Hathaway if you want the English title.
The English title sucks. It's Hathaway's Flash. Come on.
Sinko no Hathaway. That's the proper title.
That is the real title. That's a good title. Number 11, Mobile Suit Victory Gundam.
Number 10, Mobile Suit Gundam Double Zeta.
Number 9, Gundam 0080 War in the Pocket.
Number 8, Mobile Suit Gundam Iron-Blooded Orphans.
Number 7, Gundam Build Fighters, the original, the one and only.
Number 6, Mobile Suit Gundam 00 with a Awakening of the Trailblazer.
Number 5, Reconquista in G.
Number 4, Mobile Suit Gundam Char's Counterattack.
Number 3, Mobile Suit Zeta Gundam.
And number 2, Turn A Gundam called Turn A Gundam.
And number 1, Mobile Suit Gundam.
It's here at last, Jonathan. It is the official Weekly Suit Gundam podcast list scientifically establishing the Gundam of Gundams, which happens to still just be Mobile Suit Gundam. There's a little bit of an anticlimactic number 1, obviously. It's been there the whole time, but we have ranked all 33 of all the main Gundam things. It's been a long time coming.
I guess technically the message we're sending the public is that after that first show, it was all downhill from there. That's the glass half empty way to put it.
Yes.
They made Gundam 79, it never got better, all downhill from there. Really just a waste of time. They never did it better, so why even try?
Yeah, it is the true pessimist way of reading the Gundam rankings.
Yes.
But no, again, like, it's the crazy thing about this list is that you get into, like, the top 20, and it's all just, like, great shows and great movies. You know, it's like, again, for a series that has been going on for so long and has so many different weird corners to it, the fact that Gundam is so good so consistently is mind-blowing.
It is. And I'm really happy with our combined top 20 here because I think I had Gundam X and G Gundam reversed, but especially considering we have build fighters in the top 10 and relatively high, I think having Gundam X as the outer limit of the top 20 and then G Gundam 1 outside that, I actually think reflects some of the diversity of the series we love a little bit more. Also gives a little extra love to an underloved Gundam in Gundam X. You know, I like this top 20. I like this top 10. I like the top 5. I like the top 2. Because that top 2 is a fucking rock that will never move, but for a good reason. This series is a very, very special thing, and I'm so glad we spent 3 years talking about it. And I'm glad we have a few more hours of discussions to come, because next time we'll be talking about, at a minimum I know, our favorite mobile suits from year 3 and overall, our favorite songs from year 3 and overall, we're going to do both. I think our favorite soundtracks just overall, and then we've also got characters, maybe.
Yes.
And we need to talk about how we're going to do all this because it's a tall order. But we got a few more lists coming your way next time, and we also want your feedback on what silly lists we should do for part 3, where we're just going to have a Gundam party.
Yeah, so I assume, Jonathan, you're going to put out a tweet that people can respond to
Absolutely.
and stuff to send in their lists. So send in cool, interesting, weird lists. Nothing is too weird or specific. To send in for a list of, we're not going to necessarily, depending on the number we get, we can't necessarily do everything if we get a bunch of different weird lists because lists take a long time to present. But we want as many weird, cool ideas as possible for the party episode. But we do have to, for the next episode, Jonathan, we have to do a lot of deep soul searching and hard commitment for what is going to be the hardest list ever of all time, which is the songs list. I'm fucking afraid of it. I'm afraid of it, Jonathan.
Sean, can I have your permission to just do all the Iron-Blooded Orphans song as one entry on my list and sheet?
No, but I will tell you that when I went through the total list of songs and was like bolding all the ones that I'm like, this would be in contention, I got to Iron-Blooded Orphans and I was like, I'm just going to bold this entire section and think about it later. Went on my merry way. But you have to fucking commit. You have to commit.
Okay, all right. Well, that'll be next time. I'm going to go bang my head against a wall.
It's going to be a thing.
君は生き延びることができるか